Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Lydia Painter and I am chair of the committee. I'd like to remind all participants of a few housekeeping points. This meeting is being live streamed to the council's YouTube channel. By participating, you are consenting to being recorded. If the fire alarm sounds, please do leave the meeting calmly by the nearest exit, which is through the doors on my right and out the main entrance. Officers will direct you to the assembly point on Blacks Road. The meeting will be taken as adjourned until it can safely resume business. Toilets can be found through the door at the back of the room on my left-hand side. And please, can I remind officers to introduce themselves before speaking for the first time? And please, everyone, do use their microphones. We've got a number of registered speakers this evening. You press a little button in front of you with a person on. If you've got any concerns, please do indicate and someone will come and help you. I now move to item 1 on the agenda, which is apologies. And we have apologies from Councillor Brignall, Councillor Nimmo and Councillor Mantle. Moving on to item 2, any declarations of interest? None. And moving on to item 3, are the minutes of the previous meeting agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 4, which is Bishop's Park. And before I ask the officer to present, I'd like to make clear that there is a similar item 5, regarding similar signage in Bishop's Park, but as it is a separate application which attracted its own comments, it will be considered on its own merit, as we usually do with all applications, taking things like cumulative impact into account. But as with every other application, they are presented, discussed and voted on their own merit. So starting with the officer presentation, Roy Asagba Power, please do take it away.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Mr. Asagba Power. I'm the head of the team leader in the south of the borough. I'm just going to take you through the addendum. So there's some changes to the report, which...
Please could the members of the public sat in the gallery remain quiet during the presentations? We do have registered speakers. I will call on you to speak, but now is the time for the officers to present. No, you cannot make a point of order. And I would just like to note that, so item 4 is Bishop's Park and the separate item 5, is Stevenage Road. My apologies, it's been a very long and very warm day. So we'll start with item 4, Bishop's Park, and then again, a reminder, item 5 is Stevenage Road.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just draw members' attention to the addendum for some corrections to the report for clarification. So these are presented and been circulated before the meeting. There are some changes to some of the addresses. So, for example, on page 17 to 18, there are a list of addresses between 100 and 126 Bishop's Mansions, which shouldn't appear on the list of the published reports, and they are being removed by this addendum. There are also an additional reference to paragraph 4. We delete second sentence and replace with in total. 164 objections have been received, including 36 that comprise duplicate submissions and no address given or late submissions. The responses from the following addresses have all been summarised in the report, but the addresses were not included as part of the report that was published. So there's a list of 36 addresses cited in the addendum, which refers to those 36 addresses, which includes, for clarification, the reference called NAG, which means no address given. In addition to that, since the publication of the report, there has been one late letter. Again, that has been taken into account on the addendum. It doesn't raise any new issues. all the matters that were raised in the letters that I've just referred to, together with the late letter, have all been considered as part of the planning assessment. It's just that some of the addresses were not listed, but they were all considered. There are some other references then on, for example, on page 20, again for clarification, that's when consent, if it were granted, would be for 5 years, and their consent, if allowed, would be deemed consent, and if it was considered appropriate, the council could have the signs removed through discontinuance action after the 5-year period. Also, there's a reference to Friends of Bishops Park, suggesting that they've not been consulted. They have commented on the application, I think, several times. Also, officers, just for clarity, on page 21, meant to make it absolutely clear that the officer's response in this report is about the impact of the banners, including the cumulative impact, have all been considered in the relevant section of the report, paragraph 6.6 to 6.
Please could I remind members of the public not to interrupt during the presentations, and I'll remind officers that as we've got a full room this evening, if you could please speak closely to your microphone and perhaps raise your voices slightly. Thank you.
Okay, is that better? Yeah, thank you. Sorry. 1, 2. So the other things to point out is that further objections were received, which again have been taken into account. Just again for clarification, that the cumulative impact of the banners, together with the impact of the banners, have all been taken into account in the report, paragraphs 6.16 to 6.19. Councillors Lloyd Harris and Councillor Maddox made representations to the application. Those representations were included in the body of the report. However, the separate paragraphs are now being introduced to make sure that those comments are specifically highlighted in the report. So there's new paragraphs 4.18 and 4.18b for that. And then there's also an addendum item on page 25 where it's making clear that the regulations for the Town and Country Planning Act, reference to the Control of Advertisements 2007 regulations, are highlighted, and the powers that they're relevant in this particular case. Okay. So I now come to the presentation itself. So on the screen, you'll see that the address relates to, that we're going to go through 2 presentations, each one separately. The first one is to do with Bishops Park on Bishops Avenue. Proposal within Bishops Park is for the retention of 18 non-illuminated double-sided advert banners, 1.6 metres high and 0.6 metres wide. They will be situated at a height of 2.8 metres above the ground on existing lighting columns. This is just giving you a context for the surrounding area for the Bishops Park. So you can see on the left-hand side is the location plan with the blue dots highlighting where these signs would be. And then the context for that on the right-hand side, you can see that the Bishops Park extends from the bottom corner, and you've got Fulham Palace, and then you've got the cafe in the middle with the tarmac area behind, and then beyond that to the north again is Bishops Park, and just to the right on the top of the screen you've got Stevenage Road. And the significant thing here is that there are several heritage assets in this location. You've got Bishops Park, which is Grade 2 listed. You've got Fulham Palace, which is Grade 2 listed. You've got a nearby Fulham Football Club, Johnny Haynes stand. The front of that elevation along Stevenage Road is Grade 2 listed. And also the whole park itself falls within the Bishops Park Conservation Area. Again, just trying to highlight the wider context. So on this plan, you see the heritage assets in a nearby location. So the conservation areas are highlighted as number 5, which is Bishops Park, number 28, which is Crabtree, and number 39, which is Fulham Reach. Those are identified on the plan to the left. And then the listed buildings are highlighted in red letters. So you've got Fulham Palace, the Grade 1 listed, and you've got Fulham Football Club, Johnny Haynes stand, Grade 2, and the Bishops Park itself, which is listed. Again, just sharing, making sure we're clear on the impacts of what policies are relevant here. This site is in a nature conservation area, so you can see at the bottom of the screen there's a star which kind of highlights that this is in a nature conservation area, and there are biodiversity ecology issues to be taken into account. So we turn then to some images in the park itself. So I think we start with the middle image, which is showing basically a lamppost with the signage, which is 600 millimeters wide and 1.6 meters height, and set 2.8 meters off the ground. So it's greyed out because these adverts are intended for use by any particular party, but the space is being rented effectively. In this particular case, it's on the left-hand side, you can see this is one of the main paths through the park. It's Fulham Pier, the left-hand side, which shows that banner. On the right-hand side, you can see again, it's Fulham Pier, and there's a cafe in the background. This is just trying to show some more examples of some of these adverts. The first image, number 1, is an example adjacent to the main footpath. The middle image is the number 2, highlighted in this location on the right-hand side. It's adjacent to the riverside. And then the third image is at the sort of near the entrance of the lodge building, which is part of the Fulham Palace. So these are further examples. Again, this is sort of the map on the bottom shows these ones are the northern part of the park, numbers 1 and 2. The main footpath is on the northernmost sign, where the northernmost sign is located. And then you can see the one, number 2, is adjacent, sort of, or closest to Stevenage Road. In the background, I think here you can see a sign which is on Stevenage Road, but in the foreground, that's the sign within the park. This is the footpath. On average, there's a space of something between about 55 meters between each of these signs, and there's some 20 meters minimum and up to 124 meters separation between these signs. There have been several objections, which I've referred to already. There's 164 on the application. The contents of those are summarised in the report, and these are outlined here. Impact on amenity and well-being, harm to heritage assets, conservation area, visual impact and clutter, ecological impacts, environmental concerns, and commercialisation of the park, etc. All of these things have been referred to in the report. And at the end, the reference to Councillor Lloyd Harris and Councillor Maddox, who've raised objections. Again, they're highlighted in the addendum. So in terms of planning, this is the Regulation 4, which sets out what we are required to look at in the advert regulations, and highlighted in bold are the 2 areas of interest which are specific about amenity and public safety. Unlike a planning application where there are wider issues, adverts are focused on these 2 narrower issues, albeit there are sometimes other things which are material. In this case, ecological impacts have been considered a residential amenity. So in terms of the impact of the visual banners, the banners are on the key pedestrian route through the park on existing lighting columns. There are a limited number of these, and the scale we consider does not harm the character of the park, the views to the river corridor, the conservation area, or the setting of nearby heritage assets, including the listed Fulham Palace. The design and scale and appearance are appropriate to the surrounding and do not create significant visual impact, dominance, or clutter. The Council's urban design and heritage team has raised no issues and has raised no objections to the proposals. Consequently, officers consider the adverts acceptable and compliant with Section 72 of the Planning and Listed Building Conservation Area Act and the relevant policies in the local plan. In terms of public safety, this element of it is in relation to highways normally. So banners are within the park and have very limited visibility from the public highway. Given their size, location, and low traffic speeds in the area, the adverts would not obstruct visibility, distract from drivers, create confusion, or otherwise affect highway safety. The Council's highways team raised no objection. The proposals would not adversely impact road users or transport infrastructure. Similarly, on that respect, the proposals complies with T6 and DC9 of the local plan and other relevant planning guidance policies. And other matters have been raised, again, which are covered in the report and referenced here. So in terms of neighbouring amenity, the signs are non-illuminated. They're attached to existing lampposts, which are within the park. They're of a modest size and nature, would not result in light pollution, noise, or outlook matters. The Council's environmental protection team have looked at the proposals and raised no objections. And again, we consider that proposals comply with the relevant policies in the local plan. In terms of ecology, the Council's ecology officers consider the proposals and has raised no objections. The proposed banners are not illuminated, would not adversely affect bats, birds, or other ecological receptors, and for that reason, the proposals comply with the relevant policy in the local plan. So officers are recommending that the applications be approved. Depending on how you feel, Chair, we have some other photographs which we can walk you through if you want us to show those as part of the presentation, or perhaps through the questions entirely in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we'll take the speakers next, and then we may come to the further photos in the discussion, particularly if committee members would find that useful. So I would now like to call on the registered speakers to come forwards. We have Glenn Ireland, Mark Medina, Ben Monahan, and Angela Fain. You have 5 minutes to speak between you. So if all four of you would like to please come forward, I will obviously give you time to take a seat before you start. And can I just ask, do you know how you wish to divide up the time before we begin? And please do turn on your microphone and explain how you wish to.
Oh, no, this is the right one. Good. Yes, so we're going to do 3.5 and 1.5 minutes, and myself, my name's Mark Medina, and Angela, who's from the Friends of Bishops Park, and we're going to split the time up that way.
Great, thank you so much, and really appreciate the clarity and that you've agreed ahead. It always helps things to move forwards. So Mark, just to confirm, you're going to do 3.5 minutes and Angela 1.5. So Mark, we'll start with you first. So whenever you're ready, please do turn on your microphone. You might wish to pull it closer towards you just so that the room can hear. And whenever you are ready, please do begin.
Thank you. Chair, members, thank you for allowing me to address you this evening. I've lived in Bishops Park Conservation Area for the last 30 years and was a stakeholder in the very successful Heritage Lottery Fund bid for Bishops Park in 2010. Many of you will have read the assessment I circulated of the officer's report. I do not intend to repeat that analysis tonight, but I do genuinely hope it helps you with your discussions. Instead, I want to focus on the single question at the heart of the application. The legal question before you is actually very simple. It's not whether these banners are attractive or in proportion. It's not whether this is a successful football club or a successful development. The question before you is this: have these 18 commercial advertising banners preserved the character and appearance of the conservation area and of Bishops Park specifically, or have they changed it? That is the question Parliament requires you to answer. The question before you is this. Sorry, I've said that. Section 72.1 requires special attention to preserving the character and appearance of conservation areas. The courts have made clear that in this context, preserve means do no harm. That is the statutory test. For 133 years, people have come to Bishops Park because of its openness, its tranquility, its historic landscape, and its distinctive civic character. Today, for the first time in its history, that experience has changed. Visitors entering from either Bishops Road, Stevenage Road, or Putney Bridge are immediately, and I do mean immediately, met by commercial advertising that is promoting a single private development. Those advertisements continue throughout the full length of the park. They're experienced from the Riverside Walk, the playground, the tea rooms, the bowling green, the Grade 2 listed Moat Bridge, and the approach to Fulham Palace. No visitor experiences these banners as one-at-a-time experiences. They experience them collectively. It is their cumulative presence that matters. Their repetition, their commercial purpose, and the way they've become part of the experience of Bishops Park itself. That, in planning terms, is a change to the character and appearance of the conservation area. The detailed assessment of the officer's report explains my concerns at length. This evening, I ask you to reflect on just one point. The report begins with the banners. The statutory exercise should begin with Bishops Park. The report asks whether each individual banner is acceptable. The statutory question is whether 18 coordinated commercial advertisements preserve the character and appearance of a historic Grade 2 listed public park. Those are two fundamentally different planning exercises. Ultimately, this application is about far more than 18 banners. It's about the future identity of Bishops Park. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of hundreds of borough residents, 250 of whom have taken time to register their objections, which is a huge amount, as well as resident and amenity groups who are also opposed to the scheme after having lived with it for many months. They're objecting because one historic place is being asked to surrender part of its identity to another. The decision before you tonight...
That's 3 minutes and 35.
That's... Oh, 35. Oh, can I finish the last two sentences because of the issue, or...?
If you would like, but then you will be eating into the time of the next speaker.
I'll just very quickly say every generation inherits places that it did not create for a period of time. We become the custodians, and our responsibility is to pass them on, not diminished. Please protect Bishop's Park. Please follow the Parliament. Once a historic place is lost, it is lost forever. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've paused the time there. I've paused the time there. So Angela, you have 1 minute and 5 seconds whenever you're ready. And please do move the microphone towards Angela so that we can hear her. Thank you.
I endorse everything that Mark Medina has just said. I'm a member of the Friends of Bishop's Park. I'm a committee member. The chair cannot be here tonight, but she's asked me to speak to say that we spend a lot of time in the park. We try and make it beautiful. We do litter picking, we do gardening. I coordinate the gardeners. We've all noticed the change in the park since these banners are up. For a lot of residents in Fulham, they don't have their own gardens. The park is a place of, it's a haven for them. It's a green haven of tranquility and peace and beauty. That has completely changed in the last month since those posters, banners have been put up. And I would ask that the committee collectively decide not to allow this to be rubber stamped. That's it.
Thank you very much. Please do turn off the microphone and return to your seats. And thank you very much for remaining within time. It is greatly appreciated. Just before I open up to discussion among committee members, I would just like to clarify a point that Mr. Medina mentioned 250 objectors, but I think that might have been between, I think that number is between item 4 and item 5. So on this item alone, item 4, I believe there are 164 objectors. Roy, can you confirm?
Yes, I confirm. As per the addendum, there are 164 objectors, and on the published agenda, it said 152. So that's been revised upwards to take account of the changes I referred to earlier.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. As mentioned at the start of this meeting, while the two items I think have been discussed quite a lot, sort of publicly as being one and the same, they are two separate items. And so the for item 4, it's the 164 objections relating to this item that the committee is being asked to consider alongside the application. So now moving on to questions from committee members. Councillor Harcourt.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that there were 152 objections in the original report, and when in fact the 164, and it was a technical error, i.e. names or addresses left off. Can you just confirm that? Because obviously that is an issue if we weren't able to consider all of those objections. And of those other, whatever it is, 12 objections, how many, were there any other issues in there that weren't in the other 150 odd objections? Was there anything new in there? Because it's important that, you know, we get a report on all the objections that have been raised.
Thank you, through the chair. So again, just for clarification, the additional letters that were not listed on the final agenda, all the contents of those objections were included as part of the planning assessment. The only issue was that those addresses didn't come out in the report, but all those contents of those objections were included as part of the planning assessment. So the officer's assessment was set out on a spreadsheet and was all included. Each of these addresses was included. And so for clarity, they were all received before the publication of the report, 35 of them, and all of those 35 were included as part of the assessment. There's been one late letter since the agenda was published that raises no new issues, but all the issues that are sort of highlighted in those 35 letters that are now cited on the addendum are already considered in the report. So there's only one letter that's new, and that one letter doesn't raise any new issues.
Thank you for that clarification. A further question. Mr. Medina raised the point about the definition of what is it, whatever it was, changing of the character of the conservation area, and the definition means do no harm. Can you just tell me how you assess do no harm, given that there's a recommendation that to agree with this recommendation? So I think that's an important point, because obviously it seems quite subjective, and therefore I need to know how you actually go about making that judgment.
Yes, thanks, Councillor. So I'm Alan Jones, Ebensine Heritage Team Leader at the Council. So as committee will be aware, whenever we consider any impacts upon the significance or character of a conservation area, that is the primary test that we have to consider, and again with other designated heritage assets. I think that the important point within this is the preservation element and the harm characteristic doesn't necessarily mean that any form of change cannot happen, and that's a very careful assessment that we undertake in terms of if something does change in an area in terms of development or outlook, etc. We need to be really careful about how we calibrate that. So there is a test within the MPPF that sits alongside Section 72, which actually helps us to kind of form a view on whether something is harmful or not, and that's what we've considered in this instance. I think, you know, the report is really clear about the significance of each of the assets that have been considered as part of this assessment, but ultimately we don't feel that the introduction of the banners lifts us into the point where that harm is actually occurring, or that the fact the each individual asset isn't preserved overall. So that's our assessment as officers. Now, as Roy said, that is on the basis of each of the banners in its own right, but also on the basis of the cumulative impact across both conservation areas in the second application that we'll consider later on as well.
Thank you. I think it might be helpful on that point of harm, and unless your question is sort of on the same vein, to see the additional photos that were mentioned that were, I believe, taken on a walkthrough of the area today, just so committee members can have a really full, well, quite literally a full picture of what we are being asked to assess. And Councillor Pascatoubre, was your question related to harm, or shall I come to it after we've looked at the photos?
I'm very happy to defer my question until we've had a chance to look at the photos.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Chair. So just to go through, and for the purposes of the audience as well, these are some photographs that were taken today to supplement the kind of initial assessment that officers have undertaken. So this is a series of views as you go through that kind of walking route from Putney Bridge, the entrance there, through to the Fulham Pier itself, but also then a set of views as we go through Stevenage Road as well, just to show how perceptible the banners are and how that perception changes as you move around the area, really.
Can I remind members of the gallery to remain quiet? Thank you very much. Thank you. I think that takes us to the end of the photographs, and I'd just like to say a particular thank you to officers for taking the time to go out today and take those pictures, especially on such an exceptionally warm day. Are there any questions relating to the photographs and the point around harm before we move on to Councillor Pascatore?
I'd like to raise a question about the photographs, and as a son of a photographer, I might be biased here, but these are largely photographs taken into the sun. And what we are also looking at is the reality of, something that is not perceived by most people through the means of a camera. And for example, that means that you get a massive significance in the glare of the sun when you're taking a picture, as compared to when you are in there seeing it. So would officers accept the possibility, just the possibility, that what is shown in the camera is not going to necessarily fully reflect the 360-degree experience of someone who, for example, is under the canopy of trees, which has a massively different impact on the light than you would see in a digital picture?
Thank you, Councillor. So just to be clear, these images are just to show cumulatively how all of the signs read as you go through the park. You are correct. These are, from one walking route, there are different routes that can be taken. They are on an exceptionally, sunny day where there is going to be some glare. Those conditions will change throughout the year. That's perfectly fine. I think in terms of the presentation and these images, they're just intended as a reference for members. They're not intended to show every single condition of when the banners will be visible. It's given the nature of the scheme, we've seen on other proposals a full kind of townscape visual impact assessment. We don't think the scale of the proposals warrants such an exercise, but they are just there to help members to make a decision on the applications.
Thank you very much. And I think for the benefit of all the committee members, I would say that we are used to looking at sort of photos of planning applications, and we have to bear in mind, whatever the application is, that we're always looking at kind of just a snapshot in time. Technology hasn't yet allowed us to be transported through the joys of Bishop's Park at every moment of the year while we're sat in this room. Councillor Harcourt.
Thanks, Chair. On a very similar basis, I want to ask some questions. I presume these are just sort of general shots, because we have had this before, where actual visual shots showing how things have changed, the impact of new buildings and such like are, and it depends very much on the type of camera, type of lens being used. Obviously, if you're using to use a technical terms, the old-fashioned standard lens, which gives roughly the human perspective on things, you'll get one thing. Whereas if you use a wide-angle lens, you're going to see the banners are going to be much smaller in size, and the perspective changes. So, it's just to clarify that on how this is. But I gather from what you were saying that these are not meant to be a technical view as such. They're just a general example of what it looks like.
Yes, through the Chair, Matt Butler, Assistant Director of Development Management. Just at risk of stating the obvious, but I thought I'd just be very clear with committee. Officers have not based their assumption on these photographs. Indeed, they were only taken today to aid committee members as a reference point. Our assessment obviously being based on site, numerous site visits by numerous officers.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And again, I think sort of helpful for the committee. I mean, I can't speak for all of us, but I'm a regular visitor to Bishop's Park, but it is helpful to have the reminder of what we are looking at. Councillor Pascatore, did you want to ask your other question?
Thank you very much. Just a couple on the point of cumulative impact. Obviously, this is valid planning consideration because we're not looking at just 18 individual applications, but one application for 18. And as part of that, officers and the committee are being asked to make a judgment on what is acceptable and what is not. And I was wondering about the how granular the criteria is by which we do that. Because, for example, when I went to have a look at them in Bishop's Park, you'd count out about 60 metres, and there were 3 in there. And you might say that, you know, common sense requires that for wayfinding, you probably don't need 3 signs and 60 metres. And so I was wondering what level of subjectivity do you accept in the assessments that you've made?
Sorry, can you just elaborate further, Councillor? Sorry, because are you trying to explain the number of signs, or is it the actual nature of the impact? Because that's how we've assessed this, really, is the cumulative impact of all these signs and the locations that have been selected.
Absolutely, I'll be clearer. Judging cumulative impact is not exact. It depends on the judgment that you form. How subjective is that? And what would be seen as acceptable and not acceptable? Because I would imagine, and I think this is reflected by the amount of people that have had opinion of this, that there's real difference between what people think is objective, is acceptable, and what people isn't. So just how firm are those planning criteria?
So, through the chair, apologies, I'm not getting the right end of the stick here, so to speak. We're here to assess what's been put before us, what's been, you know, and each application we've looked at on its merits, but also cumulatively, as we've explained. We're not going beyond that in terms of what this could lead to in terms of more banners. That's not what we're being asked to do. The applicant has applied for what's in the application. You touched on wayfinding there, Councillor. This may help. Apologies if I've got the wrong end of the stick, as I said, but we're not assessing these on the basis of what's practical for wayfinding, because we're just looking at the structures themselves, irrespective of what the applicant's intention may be. I don't know if that helps in any way.
It does a little bit. I think what I was trying to get at is that you will have come to a conclusion by having looked at it and saying, this is fine by us, which it would equally be reasonable to come to a conclusion that say this is not fine, because there's no objective criteria on which to base that.
The assessment is set out in the statutory framework. So when an application is made, we have to assess it within that statutory framework, which clearly identifies our criteria within which we should assess it. So we have to make a professional judgment on whether it sufficiently complies with the relevant policy considerations, and consider it in those material, or sorry, in that statutory framework, unless material considerations determine otherwise. So other material considerations do, for example, include representations we receive. Hence, those have been, as we've discussed previously, those have been carefully detailed and considered as part of our assessment.
Continue. And one of those is that something is overly dominant. Now that word overly, that does quite a lot of lifting. So is it left to you as planning officials to decide precisely what overly means? Because two people could look at the same thing and come to wildly different conclusions about whether something is overly dominant.
Through the chair, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, it's not a precise science, this. It's not like we can plug this into an equation, it pops out an answer that this is over the top, or this is acceptable, or there could be more. It does require something of this nature, its inherent nature does require subjective assessment, and hence we've done that within our professional capacity. We've given our assessment in the report, and it's obviously at committee's discretion whether they agree with us or not. I hope that's...
So a committee could decide that they are in fact overly dominant, and that would be a totally valid planning response to something of this nature.
Absolutely, yeah. If committee have the discretion to determine these unacceptable, if they were, then we'd have to go through why and have the reasons for refusal outlined as part of the formal process.
If I sort of might make something that's probably close to the comment, just having looked at it, did seem that the cumulative impact of quite large signs in a pretty small area of space, especially when it comes to the tree-lined avenue, did seem to me a little excessive. So that might be some indication of where I'm sitting on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pascal-Touré. Any further questions from committee members? Councillor Dennis Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of commercial advertising is surely to be seen, to draw the attention of someone walking by. And given in the conservation area, we're trying to reduce the impact on visual amenity, and I emphasize visual. How do officers come to the conclusion that commercial advertising doesn't impact someone's visual experience in the park?
I mean, thank you, Councillor. I mean, the report seeks to clarify how we've come to that conclusion. So that is on the basis of site visits, as Matt's mentioned. You know, officers within my team have reviewed this alongside the case officer and managers within the service. I think we have to take outside of this the commercial element. This is, as Matt said before, the nature of what's been put before us is the banners with the kind of the detail and illustrations that are on those. That's what we've considered, and we consider as officers that does meet the immunity test. So I think that's where we've got to look at it. It's on the merits of what's been submitted and what's been put here before us, really.
Sure. I mean, do officers accept that, commercial or not, it doesn't really matter what's being advertised? If someone's gone to Bishop's Park to enjoy a peaceful walk or to sit on a bench and read a book, the fact that their attention is being drawn to visual things other than the peace and quiet of the park, is that not something that we could consider as an impact on visual amenity?
Sorry, again, Councillor, just to reiterate what Matt's just said, that again...
Could I remind the gallery, please, to not make any noise? I'd like to be able to hear from the officers. Thank you.
As Matt just said, that's a decision for members to take, and that's, again, why the application's here for committee. Again, the officer recommendation is that there isn't an amenity issue that needs to be considered, that the conservation area and other heritage assets are preserved overall, and there isn't any identified harm resulting from these proposals.
Thanks. But I think within that comment, you accept, or officers accept, that this is a subjective position, and it would be reasonable for members of the committee to come to the conclusion that there is an impact on visual amenity.
We've given our recommendation, our professional view, and our assessment. We've presented it, and it's obviously discretion of committee to agree or disagree with it. If you disagree, you will need to give reasons why.
Thank you. Do you have further questions?
Yeah, I have a question unrelated to what I've...
Could I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't know why I'm asking. I'm the chair. I
Go
will ask a question. I would like to know just more about this point of amenity in relation to advertisements in particular. You very helpfully have the planning assessment on the screen. And Roy, you said that there was particular interest in these words, amenity and public safety. So with those, my understanding is that they are the two key things taking into account with a planning assessment related to an advertisement of this nature, as opposed to, say, a house or a building where there may be other material considerations taken further into account. Not that material considerations aren't taken into account here, but the focus is really on those two words, amenity and public safety.
Yeah, as he pointed out on the screen, you've got the regulations which set out quite clearly under the Town and Country Planning Act, investments regulations. The two key issues of interest are amenity and public safety, and that's what was introduced at the beginning of the discussion presentation. And notwithstanding the fact that there is some commercialisation, that is part of the consideration of amenity. So that's not to take away anything that's been said in the discussion, but that's part of the assessment. And our assessment and planning judgment is that there's no sufficient harm based on our assessment of the proposals.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Before I return to Councillor Dana Sanderson, are there any further questions to my right? Councillor Dana Sanderson, do you have a list of questions? I'm just mindful of time, and if we could avoid doing too much back and forth with the officers and respect the committee process and ask questions through the chair, I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Not too many.
Well, let's take your first one.
Okay. So the Bishop's Park Conservation Area, the language I understand is that there aren't meant to be any hoardings in the conservation area. I would like to understand officers' position on this. How do we define hoardings, and how has it been determined that these banners do not qualify as them, or have we determined that they do qualify as them and that we've discarded this point? I would just like a bit of clarification on that.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think your reference is to the character profile for the conservation area. I think there's a couple of things that come into play with this. The character profile was adopted quite a long time ago, and obviously there is a comment in the profile that covers off around advertisement hoardings. As officers, we don't consider what we've got here is an advertisement hoarding. It's something slightly separate. At the time the character profile was adopted, these kind of advert banners on lampposts weren't really in vogue at that point. So that's why we consider there is a difference between what the character profile said as generic guidance to what we're considering before us today. And again, that's why the profile isn't referenced in the report, because we don't feel that that element of the broad design guidelines that are in for this conservation area would fall within that definition as a result, if that makes sense.
And I'll just jump in with a very basic question. Could you describe what you mean as a hoarding? By my mind, they are sort of the big boards that you often see outside land that's being developed, but I'd love sort of a clearer definition of than mine. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So there's a different element of hoarding. So there can be site hoardings whilst construction's ongoing or a site that's vacant. There are other hoardings such as poster hoarding. So, the old kind of the old adverts that were kind of on the gables of walls that were kind of heavy advertisement content. So significant structures and significant elements that potentially would result in harmful impacts if they affect the setting or significance of heritage assets, which is why in part the advertisement regulations that are in place were drafted as they are, because of the fact that those considerations of amenity do cover off those heritage assets as well. But I say what we've got before us now, the banners that we have here, they're not the same as the hoardings that are referenced in the character profile.
Thank you. And sorry, I promise I'm not deliberately trying to cut off your questions. I'm just doing a bit of a glossary game. So the character profile, if you could give a bit more of a sense of what that is as a document. Is it something that is referred to as absolute law, or is it something that is guidance that should be taken into account with regards to planning considerations?
Yeah, so thanks, Chair. So again, just for the avoidance of doubt, so a character profile, what's commonly now referred to as a character appraisal, is basically something that the local planning authority can produce to kind of give more detail on the special interest and significance of a conservation area. It's also meant as kind of a regularly updated understanding of kind of key issues in that area that can then form part of a management plan. So it's basically given a bit more detail. It's there as guidance. It says to help inform both residents and developers coming forward, particularly on planning applications. to really understand how they can tailor their own submissions to understand that special interest, really.
Through the chair, I would just add, just to assist committee, is that it's not part of the development plan, just to clarify that point, which, as I referenced earlier, is the if you like, the Bible against which we have to assess applications against.
Thank you. That's incredibly helpful. Every day is a school day, even when you've been on planning for 18 months. Councillor Dana Sanderson, back to you.
Initially, more of a comment. It was mentioned that at the time that the character profile was put together, that the concept of these lampposts with banners wasn't there. But the implication of that is not that when that was set up, that you wouldn't be opposed to that sort of advertising. You know, the fact that they specifically highlighted advertising hoardings does not, to me, suggest that they do accept advertising banners, which brings me on to the consultation. I would like to understand a bit better at what stage community organisations and local residents were consulted and to what extent they were able to influence these proposals. Yeah, over to you.
So in terms of consultation, the statutory process was carried out in relation to the application. So there were site and press notices that were provided. We didn't feel it was appropriate to send out individual notifications because of the nature of the site. So we felt it's appropriate and within the statutory requirements to do site and press notices. And all of the comments were received as summarised in the planning assessment and any ones that were not included on the list that I mentioned earlier. All of those have been included in the assessment, and the addresses have also been highlighted as part of the assessment of the addendum, sorry.
Thank you. Do you have a further question?
I do, thank you, Chair. So just for clarity, did you reach out to any community organisations beyond the statutory process, such as the Friends of Bishop Park or the Fulham Society or any other similar groups like that?
There's no requirement to do so, and you know, Friends of Bishop's Park have commented on the application, for example, and then I think we've had about 3 letters if you look on the list. So they've had ample opportunity, and we feel that we've carried out quite extensive consultations sufficient for people to be aware of the proposals. And given the large response, that indicates there's been, you know, wide knowledge of what's happening. So the purpose of the consultation is to make sure that people know about the proposals and are given a fair opportunity to comment on the proposals. And we feel that's what's happened.
And I'd like to ask again a supplementary question. You said that there was quite a significant amount of interest in this application. We've seen the 164, and I believe that comments and letters that actually came in after the consultation process, and in one instance, even after the print deadline, were included in the documents that we as the committee are considering and have been taken into account.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, through the Chair. So if you look at the addendum as an example, I think the closing date for the consultation was the 10th of June. And of those 35 letters that were cited on just the addendum alone, the vast majority, more than 2/3, I think, let's just work out. 23, I believe, 23, 24 were received after the deadline date. So those were taken into account as part of the assessment. So.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And again, just thank you very much to officers. I know that an application that attracts this level of attention does require a lot of work and input for you, and going through those letters one by one to make sure that residents' voices are fully heard. Please could I remind members of the gallery that attempts to interact with committee members or distract us as we're trying to do our jobs are not particularly welcome, and if your behaviour does impact members of the committee, you may be asked to leave. Just a polite reminder. Back to you, Councillor Dana Sanderson.
I've got no further questions.
Excellent. In that case, are there any further questions from this side? So we will move on to a vote. Firstly, on whether recommendation 1 on the report is agreed. Members, when I call your name, please can you confirm if you're voting for the recommendation, against, or not voting? And I will start with Councillor Harcourt.
For, sorry, for.
And Councillor Melton.
For.
Councillor Pascatoubre.
Against.
And Councillor Dana Sanderson.
Against.
And I vote for. Therefore, subject to the changes made in the addendum, the recommendation is approved. I will now move to whether recommendation 2 in the report is agreed. And again, members, when I call your name, please can you confirm if you're voting for, against, or not voting? Councillor Harcourt.
For.
Councillor Melton.
For.
Councillor Pascatoubre.
For.
Councillor Dana Sanderson.
For.
And I vote for. Therefore, subject to the changes made in the addendum, the item is approved. Now, moving on to item 5, Stevenage Road, and I will ask Roy Asagba Power to please present on this item.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is similar to the previous one, but the banners are along Stevenage Road. It's part retention and part proposed, unlike the previous one, which was all retention. 18 non-illuminated double-sided advert banners, and they are 2.2 metres high, which is slightly higher than the ones in the park, and 0.785 metres wide, again slightly wider than the ones in the park. But they're at a similar height on existing lighting columns. So this is providing you with some context. So you can see, if you see my cursor, Stevenage Road extends from down the south of this image, where the banners are being proposed adjacent to the park, past the stadium, right up to about this point here, or where my cursor is. The ones on the left-hand side that are highlighted in blue are the ones that are existing. The ones that are in yellow, gold, are those that are being proposed but not yet installed. The adverts stretch between the bottom here, so they're on the image, to the top, around about half a mile stretch along Stevenage Road. The site lies within the Crabtree Conservation Area, in the Fulham Reach Conservation Area, and also in the Bishops Park Conservation Area. So I'm just showing this image again, which shows where these conservation areas are. So numbers 5, highlighted on the plan, is the Bishops Park. Number 28 is Crabtree, and then number 39 is Fulham Reach. There are various listed buildings, the Fulham Palace, which I've mentioned already, grade 1 listed, the Fulham Football Club, Johnny Haynes Stand, which is grade 2, and then Bishops Park itself, which is listed. Again, it's in a nature conservation area, so biodiversity and ecology issues of note. These are some images, so you can see in the middle again the typical sort of format of the banner on a lamppost. On the left-hand side, you can see the Johnny Haynes Stand in the background and the banner in the foreground. On the right-hand side, you've got a typical sort of residential street on the opposite side of Stevenage Road with the banner in the foreground. And then you've got this image, which gives some more examples. So the top image just shows again where these signs are located. You can see that there's one sign here which is actually for a physiotherapist rather than for any football club, and that's at the junction near Englethorpe Street, which is here. And there's one opposite, I think the Johnny Haynes Stand, which I've mentioned here in this location, that's highlighted here. And on average, they are separated some 40 metres between these signs. And the minimum is sort of 26 metres, but it goes up to 124 metres separation. I'm just showing here this comparison where these signs are in relation to Stevenage Road. And you can see this image here is within the park. And these two signs here along Stevenage Road are approximately on this image in this location here. So that's the park on the bottom, within the park, and then there's two signs in this location which are near those on Stevenage Road itself. Again, there were lots of objections that were raised by members of the public, and those are taken into account, very similar to what I've said in the previous presentation. Also, Councillors Lloyd Harris and Councillor Maddox raised concerns. Reference here again to the regulations that need to be taken into account, with the amenity and public safety being the key issues to take into account in terms of adverts. And in terms of visual amenity, the banners are on Stevenage Road attached to existing lighting columns. We feel that they are a limited number, scale, do not harm the adjacent parks, open character, use to the river corridor, conservation areas, or the setting of nearby heritage assets, including Fulham Palace and Fulham Football Club. The Council's urban design and heritage team raised no objections. Appropriate design, scale, and appearance we feel the signs have, which do not create significant visual impact and do not appear dominant or contribute to visual clutter. The banners preserve the character and appearance of the setting of the area and nearby heritage assets, and for that reason we feel the proposals comply with the Section 72 of the Listed Buildings Act and the relevant sections in the local plan. In terms of public safety, which is relating mainly to highways matters, banners on Stevenage Road are visible from the public highway. The Council's highways team have raised no objections. Given the relatively low traffic speeds in the locality, proposals would not harm highway safety. The banner size, location would not obstruct visibility, distract from drivers, create confusion, or adversely affect road users or transport infrastructure. Again, for that reason, the policies in the local plan we feel they're complied with, as together with the relevant policies in the SPD. Other matters, neighbouring amenity, again covered in the report. Banners are or would be mounted on existing lampposts and are or would not be illuminated. Council's Environmental Protection team raised no objection. The banners are modest and would not result in light pollution or amenity of nearby residents, including matters such as noise and outlook. And therefore, we feel they comply with the relevant policies in the local plan. The other matters to be taken into account are ecology, again referred to in the report. The Council's ecology officers raised no objection. The proposed banners are non-illuminated and would not adversely affect bats, birds, or other ecological receptors, and therefore complies with the relevant policies in the local plan. So before I get to the recommendation, I should draw members' attention to the addendum. So this is a separate report and so separate addendum. So first, again, draw members' attention to the deletion of one address in the list which shouldn't appear. That's, I think, 143 Bishop's Mansions on the addendum. Otherwise, in terms of numbers, on the printed published report, there were 82. In total for this report, that figure is updated to 95. And again, the 14 letters which relate to the, duplicate submissions, no address given, and late submissions. The addresses that I've cited in the addendum, they've all been taken into account as they were all received before the print. So although the addresses don't appear, as I said before, on the original agenda, they were included as part of the assessment. So that's why the clarity has been brought up here on the addendum. I think the other matters I've raised are just duplicates of what I said previously, so I won't go through those again. But otherwise, yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. So officers are recommending recommendation for approval.
Thank you very much, Roy. I would now like to invite the registered speakers to speak on this item. We have Glenn Ireland and Mark Medina. And again, you have 5 minutes between you. Can I assume that you're Glenn, and can I assume that you'll speak for the whole 5 minutes? Is that the plan? Excellent, thank you. As with previous speakers, please do take the time to get yourself settled and press the button with the little person on in front of you. Pull the microphone nice and close to you so that the rest of the room can hear. And please do start whenever you are comfortable.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman and councillors. Appreciate your time. So my name is Glenn Ireland. I've lived in the Bishop's Park area for 32 years. I moved to the UK permanently from Canada. Just get the Canadian thing on the record there. In 1994, and I've lived in the area for the entire time. I'm a spokesperson for the objectors to the Stevenage Road application. So just as a formal matter, can I please just formally adopt the comments that were made in relation to the other application? I think many of them have direct application here, so in the interest of time, I will do that. I think the question of the legal standards has been canvassed quite widely. I think the only comment that I would make as a retired solicitor is that there's a lot of emphasis in the materials presented today on the amenity and public safety test, much less on the obligation in planning applications in relation to conservation areas to apply the standard of preserve or protect. And the do no harm concept is not highlighted significantly, and it should be. And I think when the council is reviewing, when the committee is reviewing this decision and considering it, it must look at whether there is an impact of harm. And if there is any harm, and there was a mention of there not being enough or significant enough harm earlier, the test is no harm. It has to preserve or enhance the character, and that needs to be borne in mind. Now, what's different about this application? There are a few things. They were touched on obliquely a moment ago, but I think they need to be highlighted. Obviously, there are 3 conservation areas implicated by this application. There's the grade 2 listed Johnny Haynes stand, which does not arise in the context of the other application. This is a residential area, not a park. The banners that are proposed here are 80% larger than the banners in the park, and I'm not sure if that came through clearly earlier. No explanation for why that is the case. This is, and this was pointed out, an expansion of what is existing in the neighborhood. So when you read in the report that the banners as cited currently do not raise issues, you should remember that it is not just the banners that are currently cited, but the additional banners that are proposed that are not in place. And of course, your decision a moment ago on the park, which I regret, but it is a fact of life, really does raise this question, which was touched on earlier, of cumulative impacts. We're now considering a total of 36 banners stretching from the park gate all the way to Langthorne Street, 36. And in the report, there was originally no discussion of the cumulative impact of these. I see that there is some vague reference to it in the addendum, which I received 5 minutes after arriving here for this meeting. But again, I'll come on to the flaws in the report. The report has a number of, I think, errors and omissions, and you, I believe, ought to take these into account. There's a lot of discussion and description around the park, and rightly so, in connection with the other application. A lot of that has been duplicated over into the Stevenage Road application. There is no separate detailed description of the character of Stevenage Road, or indeed the character of the Johnny Haynes stand, which, as I said, is a grade 2 listed building. And I think that's very unfortunate. A number of the conclusions reached in the report talk about, and this is the Stevenage Road application reference, there being no harm to views from within the park. And obviously that has no relevance to this application. That's paragraph 616, if you want to make note of that. The omitted objections, I think that's a very unfortunate situation, and I think that should be considered carefully. I understand that the officers have indicated that these were all taken into account, but I think you would find very little confidence in this room that that was actually the case. In particular, our 2 ward councillors whose objections were not even mentioned in the original application. The fundamental problem here, and we touched on this question of subjectivity, is really these reports amount to nothing more than the subjective opinion of the officers. There, Councillor Harcourt, you asked the question to start with. Where is the analysis? Where is the consideration of how these standards have been applied in other contexts, and what is an objectionable impact on the community, and what is not? What would amount to harm and what does not? All we hear is that, well, this was the application put in front of us, and this was the conclusion that we drew. And as far as I'm concerned, that's unacceptable for the community. It's unacceptable as a legal matter as well. Now, is there harm? I will quickly say there is harm. And as far as the Johnny Haynes stand is concerned, it's a grade 2 listed building. These banners, and I think we would all agree, could never be affixed to the facade.
Thank you very much, Glenn. That's your 5 minutes up.
Oh, I thought I might get a warning.
Well, please do feel free to come to the end of your sentence, but no
will come
further.
to the end. They could not be affixed to the stand, but of course they can now be presented on the light standards. As for the community and the residential area, this is the lived experience of the community because the signs were put there, the banners were put there without authorization. So every objection that you see is based on our lived experience, not a theoretical objection.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Please do take your seat. And please do turn off the microphone. Thank you very much. So we now move to committee member questions. I'm going to start with one of my own. I'd like to ask I'd like to ask officers if Stevenage Road is a purely residential street, or when it comes to matters of planning, is it considered a mixed use street?
Yeah, through the chair. So from officers' perspective, it's a mixed character in the locality. It varies if you walk along the street from north to south. You know, obviously down at the bottom, you've got the Fulham Football Club, the Johnny Haynes stand, and then as you move further north, you've got more residential properties. So there is I would describe as a mixed character in the locality. And the report, because reference has been made to the report, talks about views affecting the pedestrian route through the park along Stevenage Road. And obviously the photographs that you see, we've referenced Fulham Palace, we've also referenced Fulham Football Club. Through the images we've shown tonight, we've shown images of the surrounding area, which includes not just the Fulham Football Club in the park, but also residential properties in the locality, which I think clearly demonstrate that there's a mixed character in the locality. Thank you. I'd also like to raise a question relating to the number of banners, again, just as a point of clarification. Mr. Ireland mentioned, I think, 36 banners, but for this application, which we're considering on its own merit, there are 18, 12 retained and 5 proposed, although from my maths, that does make 17. So just some clarification on the numbers, Roy, would be really helpful for this application. Through the chair, thank you. So this image you can see on the screen, you've got to the north on the left-hand side, there's a map which shows 5 yellow dots. Those are the ones that are being proposed. And then you've got the remainder are blue dots, which are the ones that are existing and being retained or would be retained as part of the development. So there's a distinction between those that propose and those that are existing, but the application assesses the impact of all of them together. And for clarity, again, this is quite a half a mile stretch of road, so the character does change from one end to the other, but overall we feel that these are very modest in size. Thank you very much. I will pause on my questions and ask if committee members, Councillor Harcourt.
Thank you, Chair. At the risk of going over the same as we did for the previous application, I think it was the 14 objections that the addresses or whatever were missed off. And we've just heard Mr. Ireland say that he believed that members sitting in the audience here tonight did not have confidence that those objections were taken into account. And that includes the ones by councillors, the 2 local ward councillors. Obviously, that's an incredibly important point and an area of great concern if that is not the case. So I need to know, get that reassurance that is the case. It has been taken into account.
Yeah, through the chair, just again to reiterate and to hopefully reassure you that all of the application, all the representations that were received as part of this application were considered as part of our planning assessment. So they were all in the box, as it were. However, some of the addresses that we had for those properties have not been listed in the report. So for completeness, those addresses which haven't been listed, they are now part of the addendum. And on the addendum, you can see there are 14 addresses or 14 additional letters that were received, which have been specified on the addendum. And there are a few there which refer to NAG, which is no address given, but otherwise all of those are being included together with all the ones that in fact, there are no late items on this one. They're all in time, so they've all been considered. So the total number in the end that were considered was 95, as against the 82 on the published report. But just for reassurance, all the objections have been considered as part of our planning assessment and are summarised in the report,
including the comments from the 2 councillors that were originally missed off.
Yeah, in fact, the 2 comments from the councillors were included. It's just that they were subsumed within the summary of the comments. And so to make a distinction, we've included 2 separate paragraphs to make it clear that what those objections were from councillors. And if I can ask a clarifying question, when you're putting these reports together generally,
it's the proper process that all of the comments from residents, councillors, interested groups and so on, they are assessed and summarised, for want of a better word. So it wasn't that previous comments weren't included, but what you've now done is included the councillors' comments for completeness. And if I can put a second question on the end of that, which is that those 14 addresses that were missed off the original report, are you confident that the contents of those comments are fully reflected in the report?
So you're absolutely right. Through the chair, for completeness, we've included separate paragraphs for the two councillors to make sure their comments are highlighted. In terms of all the letters and emails, etc., that we received as part of the consultation, we've been through each individual letter with several officers on a number of occasions since the publication of the report to make sure that those are all covered in the assessment, and they are all covered in the assessment.
Thank you very much. Questions from this side of the room? Councillor Danis Arneson.
It's a bit more of a curiosity, but I noticed when you had the map that there was a gap. Yeah, if you get up the one with the banners, yeah, there's a gap here, and I'm just wondering if officers knew why the applicant has proposed that large gap.
I think in a nutshell, we have to deal with what's put before us, and what's been submitted before us is those locations. I'm not sure whether they consider any other locations, but certainly what's before us and what's before committee tonight is the locations that have been submitted.
Further questions? Councillor Pascal Toubrey.
Very minor point of clarification. If it is legal and one pays the right sums, just to clarify that you could have whatever advertising you wanted on those banners.
Technically, yes. Obviously, there's other legislation which limits, the type of advertising, let's say, in some cases. But the image that you see here in the middle, that's what's being applied for. The grey sort of, or greyed out area is the banner area, but the content of that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at the size and scale of it and the materials. Okay.
And if I can ask a supplementary question to that, I think it would be helpful for everyone in the room if you could clarify the particular conditions or legislation that, for want of a better word, sort of controls what goes on that banner. And apologies if you don't have the kind of full detail of advertising legislation, but I mean, my assumption is that you, just because the permission's been given for the physical space to be there, or if the permission is given, it doesn't mean that you could put, or the advertiser could put, absolutely anything, whether that's offensive content, illegal content. But some clarification there would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've got our legal representation here, but in short, anything that's offensive, anything like that wouldn't be something that's would be allowed, but there's other legislation for that. So yeah, that's made clear in the planning regulations. Yeah.
Thank you, that's helpful. Would you like to add to that?
Yes, I mean, the officer is perfectly right.
Did introduce yourself.
Sorry, yes, I'm Rinalini Rajaratnam, head of Law for Place. Just to draw your attention to in the addendum and I believe in the report as well, 61B of Regulation 4, subsection 4, provides that unless required in the interest of amenity or public safety, an express consent shall not contain any limitation or restriction relating to the subject matter, content or design of what is to be displayed. So there are the regulations set the parameters and you have to make the decision within those parameters.
Excellent, thank you. That's, and Roy, if you'd like to add.
Sorry, just through the chair, I've just been brought to my attention that the reason why there's a gap between some of those problems is because I think the question was asked earlier by the councillors, because there are no lighting columns in that location. So that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I did wonder if that might be the case. Further questions from members? Councillor Harcourt.
Thank you, Chair. Goodness, I remember taking my first driving lessons in Stevenage Road many moons ago. It's a different, it's a conservation area, yes, but it's a totally different character to the previous one we looked at, which is Bishop's Park. So one obviously is a park, one is residential with heritage assets like the Johnny Haynes stand or the Stevenage Road stand or whatever it's referred to, the wooden one anyway. And how do you go about making that same assessment of harm or change in character? Because they're two different ones. One is that, you know, there's traffic and things obviously that need to be taken into account as well.
Thank you, Councillor. So just going back to the assessment again, you are quite right that is the character is different in these two areas. I think again, in terms of applying the statutory duties and obviously that amenity element, given the fact that there is a commercial building in play as part of this street, again, that character does mean that we result in no harm, particularly to the listed buildings in this instance. The buildings themselves are clearly legible. You know, there isn't any intervening change. I mean, I think one of the objectors mentioned it before around the fact that I think we'd be in a different position if there were advertisements being suggested to be on the facade of the building. These are freestanding lampposts and don't impact upon setting or significance of any of the assets in that way, similar to the manner we've discussed before, really.
No, because, you know, we were talking about in Bishop's Park, a loss of tranquility, a loss of that peacefulness and such like, which doesn't obviously apply to Stevenage Road, where there's traffic and people like me learning how to drive. So, you know, it's a different assessment, and I'm just trying to get to how on earth you get to that same point, or there's different criteria that are applied, or different, the way they're applied may be different.
So I think I've mentioned before, and you can see on this image on the screen that, you know, in terms of assessment, the criteria are the same: visual amenity and public amenity and safety, and those two issues don't really change. If you're talking about this particular location, obviously we've looked at the assets and location, the conservation areas. We've looked at the Fulham Football Club, which has got its heritage asset and listed status, and we've acknowledged that it's part of the character of the surrounding area. And I think if you look at the application on its merits, we feel the design and scale of the appearance of the signage in this context is considered to be acceptable. So we think that's appropriate for this in this setting. If, for example, we were thinking that the signs were too large or they were illuminated and inappropriately illuminated, then we might be coming to a different conclusion. In this case, they're not illuminated. They're fairly small on lampposts, or modest, I should say, as compared with large signs on the side of a building, for example, or large hoardings.
Thank you. Do you have a further question, Councillor Harcourt? Any further questions on this item? In that case, we will move on to voting. So firstly, on whether recommendation 1 in the report is agreed. And members, again, when I call your name, please indicate if you are voting for, against, or not voting. Councillor Harcourt.
For.
Councillor Melton.
For.
Councillor Pascal-Toubre.
For.
Councillor Dana Sanderson.
For.
And I am voting for the recommendation. Therefore, subject to the changes made in the addendum, the recommendation is approved. I will now move to whether recommendation 2 in the report is agreed. And members, again, please indicate whether you're voting for, against, or not voting. Councillor Harcourt.
For.
Councillor Melton.
For.
Councillor Pascal-Toubre.
For.
Councillor Dana Sanderson.
For.
And I am voting for this recommendation. Therefore, subject to any changes made in the addendum, the recommendation is approved. Thank you very much. If people wouldn't mind, I'd just like to take a short 5-minute break before moving on to item 6. Thank you very much. We will recommence the meeting. So if you are planning to stay, please do take your seats. Now, moving on to item 6, Liberty House. And I invite the presenting officer, Anissa Aboud, to introduce the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to Liberty House, 76 to 80 Hammersmith Road, planning reference 2024/02007/FUL. Your attention is drawn to the addendum, which contains a number of corrections, namely minor amendments to conditions 7, 25, and 28, and clarifications to 4 of the heads of terms. The application seeks the comprehensive redevelopment of the site through a mixed-use scheme comprising life sciences and office floor space, a hotel, public realm improvements, and associated infrastructure works. The application has been subject to extensive negotiation with officers and consultation. I will now take members through the proposal, the key planning considerations, and the officer recommendation. The proposal involves the partial demolition of the existing office buildings and retention of significant structural elements, including the basement and western building frame. The development would provide approximately 13,762 square meters of life science/office accommodation, use class E, a 371-bedroom hotel with cafe, restaurant, and bar facilities, including conference and meeting facilities, and a gym. The proposal would provide affordable workspace, a new public realm, and landscaping. The application site extends to approximately 0.5 hectares on Hammersmith Road. It is bound by Hammersmith Road to the south, Windsor Way to the north, Brook Green to the west, and commercial development to the east. The site currently contains a largely vacant office complex and benefits from an excellent PTEL rating of 6A, making it a highly sustainable location for intensification. Although the site itself does not sit within a conservation area, it lies adjacent to several heritage assets, including Brook Green Conservation Area to the west, Gunter Estate Conservation Area to the south, Dorcas Estate Conservation Area again to the south, and Olympia and Avonmore Conservation Area to the east. There are also nearby listed buildings, including Holy Trinity Church and St. Paul's Hotel. A detailed townscape, heritage, and visual impact assessment has been undertaken. Officers consider that the proposal would preserve the setting of surrounding heritage assets and would not result in harm that would justify refusal. Historic England also identified only low-level impacts and acknowledged the significant public realm benefits arising from the proposal. The existing site comprises 2 1980s office buildings arranged around a central courtyard. The building is currently underutilized and largely vacant. Members should note that a similar office refurbishment scheme was previously resolved to be approved in 2020, although permission was never issued. The current proposal provides a more comprehensive regeneration of the site and significantly improves its relationship with Hammersmith Road and Brook Green. Officers consider the principle of a mixed-use redevelopment to be acceptable on this previously developed site, particularly given the site's highly accessible location, close proximity to Olympia, and its suitability for employment-generating uses. These photographs illustrate the current appearance of the site. The existing building has limited active frontage, poor engagement with public realm, and substantial areas devoted to vehicle parking. Officers consider the existing building makes only a modest contribution to the townscape and provides significant opportunity for enhancement through redevelopment. This is the existing view of the front of the site, fronting Hammersmith Road. Rather than complete demolition, the proposal adopts a partial retention strategy. The western structural frame and basement are retained and incorporated into the development. This approach assists the circular economy objectives of the London Plan and reduces embodied carbon compared with a wholly new build scheme. At ground floor level, the scheme delivers active frontages along Hammersmith Road and Brook Green. The hotel entrance is located on Hammersmith Road and includes restaurant, cafe, and bar uses. The life science/office building has a separate entrance and affordable workspace provision at lower ground and ground floor levels. The layout significantly improves permeability and pedestrian experience compared with the existing arrangement. The life science building has been designed flexibly to accommodate laboratory and office uses, including both wet and dry labs. The image on screen shows the proposed typical layout plan of the first to fourth floor. Members will see that this is the Link building right here. And then as I take you to the upper floors, it's now a green roof. The hotel accommodation is distributed across the upper floors, including some on the ground floor. The image on screen shows again the typical layout of the upper floors, apart from the Link building. The basement accommodates servicing, cycle parking, showers, and supporting infrastructure, including part of the affordable workspace provision. At roof level, the development provides green and blue roofs, PV panels, biodiversity enhancements, and sustainable drainage features. These measures contribute towards the sustainability objectives of the scheme. These drawings now show the proposed massing and architectural treatment. The development comprises a 10-story life sciences and office building, a part 5-story and part 9-story hotel building. The image on screen specifically shows the south elevation fronting Hammersmith Road. The image on screen shows the proposed north elevation, so this would be the elevation facing Windsor Way, and the proposed 5-story Link block can be seen in the centre. The image on screen shows the proposed west elevation, so this would be the elevation facing onto Brook Green. The architecture uses high-quality brickwork and masonry detailing, which officers consider appropriate for this location and reflective of the surrounding townscape. Notwithstanding, final material details will be secured by condition to ensure high-quality finish. Again, the image on screen shows the proposed east elevation, so that's facing onto the commercial development onto the east. As can be seen on the proposed cross-section shown on the screen, the building steps down towards Windsor Way and includes setbacks at upper levels to reduce visual impact and improve neighbour amenity. This visualization demonstrates how the completed development would appear from Hammersmith Road. In officers' view, the proposal significantly improves the built form, architectural quality, and public realm compared with the existing office complex. This visualization illustrates how the proposed development would appear from Hammersmith Road looking west. And as you can see, you've got 43 Brook Green in the background. That's this consent here. In officers' view, again, the scheme creates a stronger street frontage and is consistent with the wider regeneration taking place around Olympia and Hammersmith Road. Turning to residential amenity has been one of the principal areas of concern during the assessment. The closest residential properties are Tudor House and Stewart House on Windsor Way. So this is Tudor House, this block, so that's the east stack, the west stack, and this is Stewart House. These properties sit to the north of the site and have directly informed subsequent design revisions and reductions in massing through the application process. The submitted daylight and sunlight assessment has been independently reviewed on behalf of the council. The greatest impacts occur at Tudor House and Stewart House. Across the wider assessment, 63% of windows pass vertical sky component daylight BRE guidelines, and 73% of rooms pass no skyline daylight BRE guidelines. This is detailed within the report, but for the purposes of this presentation, I've highlighted the key areas of concern. And members will note that whilst there are BRE transgressions, the impacts are concentrated in a relatively limited number of properties and rooms, and those are specifically within Tudor House and secondarily Stewart House. Importantly, the independent review ascertained that the headline failure figures overstate the extent of material planning harm because many failures relate to bedrooms and minor deviations or rooms already affected by existing deep balcony structures. The full assessment of the daylight sunlight impacts are stated in Chapter 11 on pages 125 to 151 of the agenda report. This slide focuses specifically on the most affected buildings. Like I said, that's Tudor House primarily and Stuart House secondarily. The key impacts are experienced by living room windows facing the development. These are assessed in full again in the committee report. However, to summarize, the most impacted windows for Tudor House is 710, so that's this here. 711, 712, 713. And again, for Stuart House, it would be 720, 721, and further along. And again, in terms of the key, as members will see, I've provided a broader context view. So this element is effectively a snapshot of this element here. So again, the green shows the windows that do pass. And then again, like I said, the impacts are localized within specific windows. And again, as expanded in the committee report, that's due to specific site constraints and an element of the deep projecting balconies and the relationship that the neighboring residents have with the existing site. Officers again have carefully considered whether these impacts justify refusal, and the proposal was amended during the application process to reduce impacts, including reductions in height and revisions to the north elevation fronting Windsor Way. While significant impacts remain again in certain rooms, officers consider that the retained daylight levels are not unusual for a dense urban context and must be balanced against the substantial public benefits achieved by the scheme. With regard to sunlight, approximately 71% of the assessed rooms comply with the BRE guidance. Again, the majority of impacts occur within Tudor House and Stuart House. The environmental impact assessment submitted as part of the application identifies daylight, sunlight, and overshadowing as the principal significant environmental effect of the scheme. However, after considering all evidence and mitigation measures, officers consider that these impacts do not outweigh the scheme's wider planning benefits. In terms of outlook, privacy, and separation distance, members will note the relationship with Windsor Way. The nearest residential properties are approximately 22 meters away. The scheme incorporates a stepped design towards the northern boundary, which assists in reducing visual bulk and impacts on outlook. Officers are satisfied that the proposed separation distances, setbacks, and design treatment prevent unacceptable overlooking or loss of privacy. Turning to highways and servicing. Highways and servicing have generated considerable public interest. The proposal removes 107 existing parking spaces and delivers a predominantly car-free development. The life science and office servicing will occur within the site, and the hotel refuse collection will take place from Brook Green. Again, officers are satisfied that the arrangements can operate safely subject to conditions, management plans, and legal obligations, as stated in the committee report. The development also secures travel plans, servicing plans, and operational management plans. Members will see from this slide that one of the most significant benefits of the proposal is the transformation of the public realm around the site. At present, this section of Hammersmith Road is dominated by a large office building set behind extensive hard landscaping and raised planters. The pedestrian environment is relatively constrained, with pavement widths varying between approximately 2.5 and 3 meters. The proposal fundamentally changes that relationship with the street. The building line is redesigned to create a far more generous pedestrian environment, with pavement widths increasing to approximately 8.5 meters along parts of the Hammersmith Road frontage. Importantly, the development replaces underused private landscape areas with genuinely accessible public realm. New seating areas, planting, bicycle stands, and areas of soft landscaping are introduced along both Hammersmith Road and Brook Green, helping to animate the street and encourage greater pedestrian activity. The scheme achieves an urban greening factor of 0.4, exceeding the policy target for commercial developments. Overall, officers consider the widened footways, increased landscaping, enhanced pedestrian experience, and improved street activation to be a significant public benefit, particularly given the site's prominent location on Hammersmith Road and its proximity to Olympia. Turning now to benefits and the planning balance of the proposed development. Officers place substantial weight on the benefits of the scheme. These are detailed on pages 176 to 179 of the agenda report. To summarize, the key benefits include economic benefits, 13,762 square meters of life science / office floor space, a 371-bedroom 4-star hotel, significant employment opportunities during construction and operation. Furthermore, the application supports Hammersmith and Fulham's upstream London strategy and the council's industrial strategy. In terms of affordable workspace, members should note that a significant benefit of the scheme is the delivery of affordable workspace, which has been a key area of negotiation throughout the application process. The proposal secures a minimum of 2,027 square meters of affordable workspace across the lower ground and ground floor levels of the life science / office building. This represents approximately 19.7% of the building's total floor space. The space will be provided at a minimum 20% discount below market rent and secured through the Section 106 agreement. In addition to the physical workspace itself, the applicant has agreed employment, training, apprenticeship, and local procurement commitments, which will help ensure local residents and businesses benefit from the economic activity generated by the development. In terms of financial contributions, the proposal will generate £1.266 million towards public realm, transport, environmental and community infrastructure. £2.59 million will be provided towards carbon offset contribution, and £347,925,000 will be provided towards employment training and skills initiative. In terms of sustainability and biodiversity, the scheme would provide biodiversity net gain exceeding the minimum of 10%, and again, an urban greening factor of 0.4% exceeding the minimum target. The proposal will also provide green roofs and blue roofs and extensive landscaping. And finally, public realm improvements are not simply cosmetic enhancements in this application. They provide long-term benefits for existing residents, workers, and visitors by creating a more attractive, safer, and greener environment around the site. Overall, officers give significant weight to these benefits when undertaking the planning balance. In conclusion, having considered all relevant planning considerations, including the principle of development, design, heritage, neighbour amenity, highways, sustainability, and planning benefits, officers consider that the proposal accords with the development plan when read as a whole. Whilst impacts on daylight and sunlight are acknowledged, officers consider that this harm is outweighed by the substantial economic, environmental, and public realm benefits delivered by the scheme. Accordingly, the recommendation is that planning permission be granted subject to completion of the legal agreement and the conditions set out within the committee report, as well as the contents of the addendum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anissa. I'd now like to invite the applicant who has registered to speak, Angus Monteith. Please do come and take a seat. You have 3 minutes to speak. Please sit yourself down, get comfortable. When you're ready to speak, if you press the button in front of you and it will turn green. And over to you whenever you're ready.
Good evening, members and chair of the Planning Committee. I'm Angus Monteith, the Development Director at MRP. MRP is a family-owned construction and development business. We're part of the McLaren Rush Group. I'm pleased to say that we are celebrating our 60th year in business. As a building contractor and a developer, we identify sites suitable for regeneration, and our business strategy is to use both parts of our business to unlock economic growth by delivering best-in-class, sustainable real estate. We control the quality of our projects by investing our own capital, and we carefully manage every phase of the development, from purchase through planning and design, and ultimately to delivery by the construction arm McLaren Rush. We appointed AHMM architects because they have successfully adopted a sustainable approach for many of their schemes, including Television Centre in this borough. The engineers and the design team were instructed to retain as much of the existing structure as possible to ensure a green approach. This has resulted in us retaining and reusing the basement, structural piles, and most of the hotel element is repurposed from the existing buildings. This gives us a very carbon efficient scheme in line with planning policy of the GLA in this borough. During the 3-year planning process, we had proactive engagement with planning officers, highway, sustainability, GLA, and the design review panel. We sought to listen and we have responded to residents' concerns, in particular the residents of Windsor Way to the rear of the site. Since submitting our application in 2024, we have had 2 major scheme revisions. We've reduced the height, the bulk, and the mass, and minimising impacts on Windsor Way residents. This resulted in the residents changing their objection to a neutral position in December 25. Some of the benefits, as the case officer has explained, this is perceived as a negative section of the Hammersmith Road. We are animating and activating the street frontage along Hammersmith Road, dramatically improving the pedestrian experience by creating a wider pavement with new areas of landscaping and biodiversity. The 4-star Maldron Hotel brand has already signed a pre-let with us, and we will be delivering their hotel, which is a concierge entrance on the Hammersmith Road, along with restaurant and cafe, providing well-managed, curated space. We will be replacing obsolete buildings with modern, energy-efficient life science office space, including the affordable workspace, and this contributes to the industrial strategy and the job creation objectives of Hammersmith and Fulham. On behalf of MRP, I respectfully ask that members support the officer recommendation and grant planning permission.
Thank you very much, and thank you for staying within time. Please do turn off your microphone and return to your seat. We now move on to questions from committee members. Councillor Pascal Dubray.
Thank you very much. I'll kick things off. The unpaid work experience placements, how long would they be for, and why are we offering unpaid?
My understanding is from economic development colleagues is that this is the standard formulaic that they use. So there's a ratio between paid and unpaid because there's benefits for both. Usually the unpaid, unfortunately, are, school kids who need experience and just an experience of the situation. But it's not to say that it's not a quality offer. It's what the council has asked for and it's what the developer has agreed to.
Thank you. Further questions, Councillor Melton?
Staying with the points raised by Councillor Pascal Tilbury, I would like to compliment the developer and officers for their engagement with Upstream London, and in particular the offering of these both apprentices and work experience opportunities, which are in line with the council's pioneering pathway bond. I think this should be best practice, and for other interested parties and developers considering new projects in the borough, I would like them to be mirroring this model. Thank you.
Completely agreed. It's very exciting to see. I still remember doing my work experience in Hammersmith a long time ago, despite growing up in Sussex, and now I've come back here. Any further questions on this item? Councillor Downer-Sanderson?
Yeah, the applicant mentioned the concessions that have been made and working closely with residents to reach a positive outcome. I would just like to understand the scale of that a little bit better. I mean, how many properties approximately do we think benefited from the changes that were implemented by the applicant and their team?
Sure, let me take you to the page. So effectively, the council employed an independent daylight sunlight consultant, and that consultant looked at the aggregate data that had been provided in the applicant's assessment and looked at where exactly is the material harm. And in this case, what we're saying is that from the total that has been identified, so you'll see that, for example, in terms of VSC failures, there'll be 41. And then in the assessment, you'll note that for Tudor House specifically, I refer to 6 cases of failures, and those are the ones that we've identified as being the most of material harm. So in terms of the actual journey of the application, the independent consultant identified 12 key living rooms within Tudor House and Stuart House across the two and said these are the primary focus of our concern and what can we do to reduce that number. So effectively the latest iteration that members have before them, that number from 12 has been reduced down to 9. So there's 9 key living rooms that have been impacted across Tudor House and Stuart House that we would say caused the material harm. So again, when you're looking at it as a whole, and that's why I provided this image where, yes, when you're looking at it in particular in these certain windows, you see the impact, but when you're looking at it in the wider context, you can see that the greens, the windows that now comply are greater than what the original application was.
Councillor Harcourt.
Thank you, Chair. There's an awful lot in this application that is incredibly good. You know, it's not very often I see an application with stuff around kitchen heat recovery schemes, anaerobic food digesters, solar battery energy, storage schemes and such like. And then it goes on to say a backup scheme of diesel generators. Why not using battery packs or fuel cells?
Absolutely, that is a great question, and it's something that officers scrutinised in detail with the applicant, and that's why the concession of / diesel generator has been included there, because unfortunately we're praising the life science / office use, the fact that it's cutting edge, but those kind of uses also demand a lot of energy requirements, and especially if you're talking labs, the backup generators that could support that energy demand, unfortunately, as far as the applicant has stated, it's not feasible at this stage. So you're right to point this out, and we have scrutinized this in detail, but what I will say is that the condition's been worded to be flexible where it allows the application of the diesel generator, but again, it's not referenced here, but an informative has been provided by the air quality officer, who again has raised similar concerns and has provided effectively a specification of if it has to be a diesel generator, it must be the highest quality saving, energy saving generator possible. But there is a condition specifically for that, and we will secure the details as part of that.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, a large part of this is lab work for life sciences. Are there any security issues around the possibility of escape of any, I don't know, bacteria or whatever it might be? I don't know what is going to be involved with life sciences, but it can involve that sort of research.
Again, unfortunately, in terms of the planning remit, there is nothing that within the planning remit that I can say that there will be something assurances towards that. But my understanding is that there would be separate legislation that would ensure that the health and safety regulations of such uses would be secure. And there has been life science use elsewhere in the borough, for example, Imperial, and it works effectively. So we would ensure that there is consistency in application for the life sciences use.
Okay, thanks. One final question from me, which I suppose is my main area of concern, which I think point's already been raised, which is about the impact on Stuart House and Tudor House. The windows and rooms that are affected, are they mainly living rooms or are they bedrooms, kitchens, which obviously that sort of effect is less impactful?
Absolutely. So the primary focus of the independent consultant's assessment has focused on where exactly is the material harm. And you're right to point out there is a distinction between loss of light, daylight in a living room compared to a kitchen or a bedroom. So I can quickly take you through Oh, I don't have it on this one, but it's okay. The main impacts that the assessment has looked at is living rooms, and in terms of the BRE makes allowances that for bedrooms there is less of an impact. So in terms of the assessment, as you'll note in the committee report, I've put in the tables that have been provided by the consultant, so we're quite clear on exactly where the harm is. And the focus, like I said, those 9 living rooms that I mentioned are specifically living rooms because, again, those are the ones that are the most impacted.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pascal-Toubry.
Very much. Just a sort of follow-up point on bedrooms versus living rooms, and I absolutely understand and accept that for planning purposes, one counts more than the other. But on behalf of those of us that spent lockdown working and living from our bedrooms, actually wouldn't have seen it that way at all. So a gentle plea for bedrooms to also be considered in general terms.
Did you want to provide any answer to that? I think it was more of a comment than a question. So I'm happy to move on. Any further questions? Excellent. So moving on to voting, firstly on whether recommendation 1 in the report is agreed. And as usual, please confirm if you're voting for, against, or not voting. Councillor Harcourt.
For.
Councillor Melton.
For.
Councillor Pascal-Toubry.
For.
Councillor Dana Sanderson.
For.
And I will be voting for. Therefore, subject to the changes made in the addendum, the recommendation is approved. Moving on to whether recommendation 2 in the report is agreed. Again, please indicate if you're voting for, against, or not voting. Councillor Harcourt.
For.
Councillor Melton.
For.
Councillor Pascal-Toubry.
For.
Councillor Dana Sanderson.
For.
And I will be voting for. Therefore, the subject to any changes, the recommendation is approved. Moving on to item 7, 27 Collett Gardens. And I'd like to ask Neil Egerton to introduce the presentation. We can perhaps wait a minute or so for the room to clear. Sorry. Neil, whenever you're ready, please do take it away.
Thank you, Chair. So this application relates to 27 Collett Gardens, and it's for the erection of a single-storey porch type extension to the front side of the main building. The site is highlighted in red on the plan here. It is a maisonette and it's part of the St Paul's, excuse me, St Paul's Court estate of Collett Gardens. The estate is not listed or located within the conservation area, and it is in flood risk zone 2. Aerial view of the site, and this is the further view here. The proposed extension would be, sorry, just trying to get the cursor to roughly in this area here. As you see, Collett Gardens is here. There is a boundary wall to the site, and then there's a further boundary wall within that as well, separating the application site. There we go. There's a view from Collett Gardens. You see the main boundary wall here, and then there's the internal boundary wall behind, and this extension is part of the application site. Again, it's showing the internal walls. And again, that's the walkway round. So the proposed glazed extension report is located supposed to be located in that blue area. It has a footprint of roughly about 7.3 square meters. It's a lightweight structure glazed with aluminium framing. That just shows you the porch area there. The aluminium would be coloured dark brown to match the existing windows of the property of the estate. That shows you the elevations. You can see that's the existing extension there, and this conservatory extension would be located here in between that and the boundary wall of the neighbour property. There you go, just a section through showing the glazing and the height. The application was subject to public consultation, and there was a significant number of responses received from the local community. We had 37 objections, as well as 7 letters of support. Concerns raised were that the proposal would be material departure from the established character of the estate. There's a consistent design to the whole estate, would set a precedent. Height would be close to the windows of the innate flat above. The extension would impinge on views. That there is restrictions in the leases for the flats that don't allow these alterations, and the board of directors on the site or the estate have refused similar alterations. That's a summary. The rest of the comments are all summarised in paragraph 2.1 of the report. 7 letters of support basically just submit that as your general support for the proposal, support the design in keeping with the estate and adding character, and maintains privacy for the property. Officers have assessed the application and consider that the proposal is acceptable, and therefore it's recommended the planning permission be granted for this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. Now we move to speakers. First of all, starting with Noel Butler and Maria Corrias, who is being spoken on. Michael Tunge is speaking on her behalf. So Noel and Michael, please do come forwards.
I've been female for 70 years, so I am Noel.
I'm very sorry, Noel. Thank you, and apologies. That was, of course, not deliberate. So Noel and Michael, I presume. Before your 5 minutes begins, do you know how you would like to divide the time between you? So 2.5 minutes each. Would you like me to let you know when 2.5 minutes is up? And if I let you know when 2.5 minutes is up, and then you can finish your... Yep, and then you can finish your sentence and we'll start the 2.5 minutes again. Noel, would you like to go first? Okay, so 2.5 minutes or thereabouts. Noel, please do start.
Good evening. Having owned and lived in St Paul's Court for 43 years, I would implore you not to allow this to happen and to use your vote very wisely. St Paul's Court has 267 dwellings in 8 blocks, not 9. All are 1, 2 or 3 bedroom flats and maisonettes. They're interbuilt and above each other, save a few terraced townhouses. 27 Collette Gardens has a west-facing ground floor entrance with a first floor east-facing bedrooms. 44 Collette Gardens in the interbuild reverse with first floor bedroom windows directly above the west front and ground floor of number 27. The planning department intend to approve 27 Collette Gardens planning stated it's considered acceptable. Well, it's not considered acceptable and far from it for those of us who live there. London Borough of Hammersmith Fulham, be more Torridge Council, please, who overturned planning permission on fields, etc. for a data centre, striving to be more green. I receive newsletters from London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham stating how green and ecological they are. To approve planning permission that will take up a third to half the garden in London is far from green, ecologically or environmentally friendly. 27 have applied to build a porch exceeding the UK legal ground size limit of 3 square metres. Number 27's measurements of 3.2 metres by 2.3 metres equals 7.36 metres. This is not a porch, it's a glass room, and it fails net zero. The glass roof will encourage unwanted wildlife to perch outside the bedroom windows of 44 and the 2 properties above. Measuring to the top of my front door architrave, where it meets the base of the dividing and delineating layer of fireproof concrete, is 2 metres 39. 27's roof height, measuring 3.2 metres, would encroach onto the property of 44's space. Do you want to create excessive reflected light or heat problems from this glass structure into the windows
You
of
have 10 seconds left.
3 properties above? I live on the opposite side of the complex. However, this is the thin end of the wedge. It completely contravenes our lease and it opens a precedent. Shall the flat roofs then ask to build
Thank you very
something?
much.
Thank you
That's
for your
your
time.
2.5 minutes. Michael, speaking on behalf of Maria, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you.
Linda Whittington was a board member 2 years back. She also owns a property in the same block as Dr. Singh. In fact, she lives at number 30, just a very short distance away from where Dr. Singh lives. 2 years ago, Dr. Singh made an application to the board to build this same porch. It was turned down by the board then because it did not meet the lease requirements of number 3.3. Linda Whittington actually came off the board in 2025. Very interesting, at the beginning of this year, the application reappeared. Dr. Singh put another application in to build a porch. On the beginning of January, the board actually conditionally approved the proposed development, and in the minutes of the meeting, it says no objections have been recorded from neighbouring residents. And we are told that 44 letters were sent to residents of that particular block. But I know 4 people on that block who never received that letter. And one suspects that 44 were not sent out. Linda Whittington, who was on the board and turned down the original application 2 years earlier, did not receive a letter, nor did Antonia Corias, who is the interlinking person with Dr. Singh. She is the person that is going to be most affected by this application. She also did not receive a letter explaining about the development. And it would seem—
You have 10 seconds remaining.
It would seem that this was very deliberate, and in fact, if those, particularly Linda Whittington, had received the letter, it would have prevented the board from actually approving this application.
Thank you. That is your time up. Noel and Michael, please do return to your seats, and thank you for keeping to time. We will now hear from Dr. Singh, who is the applicant, and you have 5 minutes to speak. So as with other speakers, please do take your seat and turn on the microphone so it goes green, and start whenever you are ready.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Singh, and I am the applicant for 27 Collett Gardens. I would like to express my sincere thanks to the case officer, Melissa Vingo-Wright, for her incredibly thorough assessment and her subsequent recommendation for approval. I also want to formally acknowledge my neighbours within the St Paul's Court estate. I want to reassure the committee that we have listened to every concern with the utmost seriousness. We have actively worked with the planning department to refine the proposal. Our goal has always been to ensure that this small, single-storey porch extension serves as a high-quality, sustainable addition to the estate. In terms of design, subservience, and visual cohesion, we've worked proactively with the planning officer to amend our original scheme. Specifically, we changed the proposed glazing material from black aluminium to dark brown aluminium. As the officer's report notes, this ensures complete visual cohesion by mirroring the tones of the host building itself. Architecturally, this infill extension is exceptionally modest. It will sit entirely alongside our existing original ground floor kitchen outrigger. Crucially, the extension features a low-profile mono-pitched roof with a maximum height of 3.2 metres and an eaves height of 2.4 metres, meaning it sits below the roofline of the existing outrigger and does not exceed the rear projection. Furthermore, our property is heavily screened from the public domain by two existing 2-metre-high brick boundary walls. You will have noted the photographs that were shown. Because of this existing built form, the porch will be virtually invisible from public views along Collett Gardens, preserving the street scene and ensuring zero visual harm to the wider area. In terms of residential amenity, light and privacy, we have taken meticulous care to ensure that the daily lives of our neighbours remain completely unaffected, fully adhering to policy HO11 and the planning guidance SPD. Outlook and light. The structure is lightweight, single-storey and heavily glazed. When assessed from the rear garden boundary, it does not breach the 45-degree horizontal or vertical lines for properties opposite or for our neighbours. The eaves remain entirely below. Because of its limited depth and lightweight nature, the officer has confirmed it will not create an overbearance presence and not cause any material loss of outlook or impact daylight or sunlight levels. In terms of privacy and overlooking, the proposed glazing is situated more than 21 metres away from the residential properties across Collett Gardens, far exceeding the standard 18-metre privacy arc requirement. For the masonette flat directly above us, the structural relationship remains identical to what currently exists with our garden. The porch introduces absolutely no new vantage points, no new balconies, no new roof terrace, meaning that there is zero opportunity for new overlooking or a loss of privacy. In terms of noise, this is an enclosed small domestic porch. It replaces a section of existing hard-standing garden space and serves merely to protect the entrance of my home. It does not intensify the residential use of the property or create any external noise disturbance. Before concluding, I would like to offer clarity in relation to a few technical and administrative points that were raised in the objections. Plan accuracy. The accurate revised plans were promptly submitted to explicitly clarify the internal floor levels and layout of the flat above, ensuring the committee has full transparency. In terms of design, the officer's report rightly confirms that it is lightweight, it is subservient, it has a subservient nature which prevents it from acting as an incongruous addition. Estate management. Regarding the estate leasehold restrictions, I can confirm that the Board of Directors has already formally granted permission for these works to take place, and legal advice was received in relation to that. The officer's report at paragraph 4.7 deals with this matter, whilst it may not be a material consideration. Lastly, although the site sits within flood zone 2, the porch is of minor scale, building over existing hard standing, meaning that it will have a neutral impact on surface water runoff. In summary, this is a highly subservient, policy-compliant, and carefully considered design that fully satisfies these policies DC1, DC4, HO11 of the local plan. It delivers a modest functional improvement to our home while strictly respecting our neighbours' amenities and the character of the estate. With the case officer firmly recommending approval, I respectfully ask the committee to uphold their professional assessment and grant planning permission. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Singh, and thank you for staying in time. Please do turn off your microphone and return to your seat. We now move on to committee member questions. Are there any?
One very brief question. Can I just clarify what the objectors were saying? The 44 letters that were sent out, were that sent out by yourselves as the planning department, or are they the 44 letters sent out by the board of whatever it is, Collett Gardens, St Paul's Court, etc.?
The officer report reference to notification letters says that we sent out 44 letters to 44 neighbouring properties. In terms of the planning application, I'm not aware what was sent out by the board to the residents, I'm afraid.
Okay, so it was actually sent out by those were sent out by the planning department?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question to clarify 4.7 on the report with reference to the Board of Directors granting permission for the works. Does a planning decision ever overrule or have the power to overrule what is agreed with leaseholders, boards of directors, and so on in this kind of estate?
No, it doesn't. Planning permission does not override any other legislation or restrictions.
Thank you very much. That is helpful. And 4.7 does note that this is not a material consideration, but does provide useful context. Are there any other questions? Councillor Pascal Toubrey.
Thank you very much. It's a really interesting development, Collett Court, and from the visuals, it seems remarkably unified and cohesive. Have there been any other extensions approved in the buildings? And if not, is there at all a consideration that this might damage the unity or cohesiveness of the structures?
I'm not aware of other permissions having been granted. However, I think the officers have assessed it and feel that due to its minor and subservient nature, it's not going to result in harm to the character and appearance of the estate. So it's not locally listed or in a conservation area, and we consider the design is in keeping with the estate.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? In that case, we will move on to voting. Firstly, on whether recommendation 1 on the report is agreed, and you know the drill now, for, against, or not voting. Councillor Harcourt.
For.
Councillor Melton.
For.
Councillor Pascal Toubrey.
For.
Councillor Downer Sanderson.
For.
And I will be voting for. Therefore, subject to the changes made in the addendum, the recommendation is approved. Moving on to whether recommendation 2 in the report is agreed. Please confirm if you're voting for, against, or not voting. Councillor Harcourt.
For.
Councillor Melton.
For.
Councillor Pascal Toubrey. Councillor Downer Sanderson.
For.
And I will be voting for. Therefore, this item is approved. Now moving on to item 8, the land west of Markfire Lane Road. And Neil, we are staying with you. Again, let's just give it a minute or so for the room to clear before you start. Neil, please do begin whenever you feel ready.
Well, thank you, Chair. Yes, the application relates to site land west of McFarlane Road and east side of Bristol Gardens. I'd just like to bring your attention to the addendum. There is one new condition added as part of the addendum for the submission of a detailed operational management plan, and then an additional clause after with regards to the heads of terms to ensure a commitment to meet the costs of the council's legal fees. So the application site is shown in red here. It is to the east of Frithville Gardens and the west of McFarlane Road after the railway. Access to the site is via a railway arch, and the northern boundary to the site abuts the sort of BBC site where there's still a phase of work to be carried out there. If you see on the adjacent to the red line of the site, building here, that's an existing substation which is not part of the application site. So the proposal is the demolition of existing brick sheds and a warehouse building and the erection of a single-storey marquee building provide 3 paddle courts, a single-storey extension to existing 2-storey office building, great toilet facilities, and then external alterations and change the 2-storey office block to a clubhouse. That just shows the northern part of the site, the part of the BBC development yet to be completed. I've got some aerial views of the site. You see here where the cursor is, that's the existing substation that's been retained and is not part of this development. The warehouse building is here where my cursor is, and then the 2-storey office building referred to abuts against the railway arches. It's the view of the site from Frithville Gardens. Just about see it through the foliage. The site is accessed from McFarlane Road. You've got this railway arch here, just a railway arch, and that provides access to the site. Inside the site is largely hard standing. This is the existing 2-storey office building which abuts the railway. And you can see the arched entrance there is currently blocked off with large concrete blocks. They've since been removed. And this is the existing warehouse building as it appears when you're in the site. It's in poor condition and it's been vacant for over 3 years. Just another view showing the substation that is not part of this development. Inside the warehouse, you see poor condition, and then that's looking north towards the BBC site. This is when the brick buildings will be demolished. Sorry. And again, on the left, you see the 2-storey office, which will have an extension added to provide disabled toilet facilities for the customers of the paddle courts. And then that's the side elevation of the existing warehouse with the boundary shared with Brooklyn Court. Just quickly, existing drawings shows the warehouse in pink that will be demolished, and the 2 brick buildings here on the northern boundary will be demolished. It's a fairly simple, plain building, monopitched roof, and I saw the photograph open and not used. The office building is not changing, it's a brick built building, just effectively 2 open plan offices. Proposal is, you can see that in red is the existing warehouse building sort of annotated. This rectangular building will be the structure that will house the 3 paddle courts. There'll be a planted biodiversity area behind the site, and then adjacent to the railway lines and the access, there'll be a recreational seating area for the customers. It's a simple rectangular building with 3 paddle courts within. It has, the eaves height is about 200 mil lower than the existing building here, and the top height is around about 2 meters higher, but it's all angled away from neighbouring properties. It's a fairly simple structure on this backland site, and you can see then the office, the extended office, your toilet facilities on the right there, reception waiting area, and open plan office for the management of the site. They will have a green roof on the proposed extension. The applicants propose a school and community use management plan, which will be captured under section 106 for use of the paddle court facilities. The more detailed breakdowns in paragraph 6.16 of the associated report. Demolition and construction logistics plan monitoring, air quality monitoring for the demolition and construction phases. You'll be permit free for the business with the exception of two blue badge spaces, and they meet the legal fees of the council. So officers are recommending, it was subject to public consultation. We did get a number of objections from the local community, mainly concerned about levels of noise and disturbance, whether the structure would be sufficient to contain the noise levels. The proposed hours of operation they felt are excessive. They are proposed to be 7 in the morning till 11 at night. And they felt that the height and bulk of the structure would be visually intrusive. We received 3 letters of support, saying that one, they felt it would deliver positive local economic, social and environmental benefits in line with the borough's wider objectives, and providing sports and leisure facilities with no real victor access, providing the community use and resident discount. On balance, officers are supportive of the proposal, and we recommend approval subject to the legal agreement and the conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have any speakers on this item, so moving on to questions. Councillor Harcourt.
Thank you. I suppose my only really area of concern about this is about noise and the possible escape of noise to the local residents. And there's a couple of residential blocks still to be built, I believe, in the near vicinity. Obviously, tennis is one thing. Paddle tennis is a bit more like squash. People bouncing off walls and ball bouncing off walls. There's a lot more noise. Can you just tell me a little bit about what's being done to soundproof it to ensure that that noise does not escape?
Sorry. The applicants run a number of paddle courts throughout the country. They have submitted a noise impact assessment with the application, which set out the level of soundproofing that would be provided. There is a range of matters, as sort of hemp screening internally, as well as other matters. That has all been discussed and reviewed by the council's noise protection team, who considered that what was being proposed should mean there'd be no noise and disturbance to the local residents. I mean, there's conditions attached as well with regards to, excuse me, the limits the any external sound level from plant, machinery or equipment during the operation of the development. So it'll be lower than the lowest background noise level by at least 10 decibels. Also a condition then that all the any plant machinery would be on anti-vibration isolators, and then noise from uses and activities within the building development site shall not exceed the British standard at neighbouring noise sensitive habitable rooms and private external amenity spaces. So it's felt by our colleagues that subject to those conditions, subject to the information they've seen, that it will not result in harm to neighbouring residential amenity and that includes the units that are yet to be provided.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Neil. I have a comment and a question. I was very pleased to see in point 616 the statement in schools and community involvement. It's really encouraging. Will the different opportunities here for schools, for individuals who have a low means of income, and for the free apprenticeship, will that be advertised to residents? I think that's such a great thing to include, but I just want to ensure that it comes to fruition.
It's set out in sort of paragraph 6.16 that they will be paddle operate in collaboration with a leisure company, seeks to provide a number of community benefits, including 2 hours of court time once a week, free of charge for a local secondary school and a local primary school, total of 4 hours of free court time to use as part of their PE curriculum. Two schools that will be chosen, that'll be form part of the Section 106 negotiations, and we liaise with our education colleagues on that. Then they would also benefit from a 20% reduction in membership fees for pupils and staff. 3 feeder schools may be offered 10% reduction, and then obviously 2 hours a month of complementary court time off peak offered to pay and play individuals who qualify with low means of income universal credits. So I think they are endeavouring to, this is what they are providing on other sites. I think officers feel this is a good public benefit for the area.
So just to clarify, and thank you for outlining how the schools part will work, but with the offer of 2 hours complimentary time for those on a low means of income and the apprenticeship, will that be made clear that it's available to the local community? I don't want it to stay just kind of buried in a document. I want residents to know that this is available to them.
I mean, that officer is from the applicants themselves, whereas other sites, other legal agreements we discussed tonight, there is the economic and employment training. This site isn't large enough to trigger that. So this is something they have offered. But I mean, I think we will try to make sure we will try to make sure that's provided and discuss with the applicant how that will be promoted to the local community.
Great, thank you. Like I said, it's such a great thing to see. I just don't want it to stay on the page. I want it to come to life. Councillor Downes-Saunders' question. Right, if no further questions, then we will move on to voting. Firstly, whether recommendation 1 on the report is agreed, and as always, for, against, or not voting. Councillor Harcourt?
For.
Councillor Melton?
For.
Councillor Pascal Toubre?
For.
And Councillor Downes-Saunders?
For.
And I will be voting for. Therefore, subject to changes made in the addendum, the recommendation is approved. Moving to whether recommendation 2 in the report is agreed, for, against, or not voting. Councillor Harcourt?
For.
Councillor Melton?
For.
Councillor Pascal Toubre?
For.
Councillor Downes-Saunders?
For.
And I will be voting for. Therefore, this item is approved. We are moving on to item 9, 72 to 76 railway arches, and I'd like to invite Ronnie Furley to present this item.
Chair, do you mind if you excuse me to blow my nose?
We can certainly take a short break for a couple of moments. So returning to item 9, and Ronnie Furley, please do present the item when you're ready.
Good evening. I'm Ronnie, and nice to meet you all. Yeah. So before I start, just draw your attention to the addendum. So I'm presenting number 72 to 76 railway arches. 2 new conditions to be added on from air quality. Just to bear in mind that this is only applicable for a restaurant use. This application is for like a flexible use approach, so they can have different uses on the Class E. Okay, so these 2 conditions only apply to restaurant. Okay, so to start off, sorry, just try to this one. Okay, yeah. So this is the proposal. So basically, it's a viaduct with 5 railway arches units in there. So just to give you a bit of context, it's just south of Putney Bridge Station. So just north of the River Thames. So the proposals are new commercial frontages and refacade to the arches. So 5 units, 72 to 76. And then we've got the demolition of the extensions at arches 5 and 76. And then again, the flexible use approach for all the arches and the rear yard, which is at the bottom here somewhere. We'll come to that in later in another slide. So just to draw your attention to the fact that 3 of the units are already in Class E. So typically only 2 of them will need change of use. So 3 already have the Class E use, so they can be flexible on the Class E. Okay, so if we move on, the application side, the context and the conservation area. So as I said, you know, it's just south of Putney Bridge Station. It falls within 2 conservation areas. So to the east, we've got Putney Bridge Conservation Area, which is this one here. So it's a small conservation area, and the site's sort of like, well, it's at the edge of the, what's that, the eastern edge of it. So this is the edge of the conservation area to the east. Okay. And then, sorry, I'm moving away from the microphone. And then we've got the Hurlingham Conservation Area on the other side of the viaduct. So again, yeah, it's just where you see the line going across, that's the boundary. So all the units are currently vacant and they're not in very good condition at all. And like I mentioned, 3 are already on the Class E. 2 units will require change of use from sui generis to Class E. If we move on. So the site overview and unit configuration. So the last use of the arches were, so we've listed the year they were vacant. So 72 to 73 was vacant in 2022, and this was last used as a car rental. And then 74, 2025, last used as a light industry unit. And that goes on for 75 and 76 as well. Okay. So we're just showing you the proposal, and so existing and proposed. This is the eastern side, so we've got the rail viaduct here. You can see how it looks, and not in a great state. This is what it's going to become, so a lot of improvement. There's a gate here at the front, which will remain. It will be accessed through a key code. And moving on the western side, which is Willowbank Wharf, existing and proposed. So this is the railway coming from Putney Bridge Station, which is that way. So this is Willowbank Wharf, which is also the Thames path. So at the moment, there are a lot of ad hoc extensions. So they propose to remove them and open up the Thames path, make it more conducive for pedestrian and cyclists. So this is the rear of the proposed unit. So basically, they'll look like that from the rear, and then you have the commercial frontage at the front. Okay. Oh, so at the side, we've got a blue plaque. So it's for Frederick Richard Sims. He was an inventor, a pioneer inventor in the automobile industry. Apparently, he invented the first armed patrol vehicle. So yeah, that's what he's famous for. He used to have a unit in the Arches. So this blue plaque will remain, and the proposal would better reveal it, make it more obvious. Okay. So this is the proposed site plan. We've got all the units laid out in, on the screen here. We've got the service yard, which is here to the rear. And then we've got some fencing going up around the Thames path here, just to sort of like make sure people don't wander into the service yard. As I said before, the Thames path will be sort of like opened because we're going to remove a lot of structures along this path here, this bit here. Cycling parking, we've got a few on site, total 10 for staff and also for visitors. They'll be through Sheffield stand. We've got refuse storage. I think they're using 180 litres bin for each unit. And this is the gate, so that will be, so that is remaining anyway, so be accessed through a security code, as I said before. The arches themselves, they are like almost the same size, and yeah, so they can be used for like a number of uses on the Class E. Okay, so in total, we've had 11 objections for this application. They centered around noise, opening hours, traffic, and social behavior, heritage impact, flexible Class E is not acceptable, so there's no management details. And just to say, we have a management plan condition as well, so that will cover that. And then increasing parking congestion, excuse me, sorry. And TfL, who is the owner of the land, they've had some engagement with the residents. They've sort of like spoken about time for opening hours and different uses, etc. And then we will use conditions to control the uses. And yeah, so basically the area has got a bit of heritage and history. The Thames path and like I said, the plaque. And the viaduct itself, it's like a Victorian piece of engineering. So in consideration of all these, we note that 3 units are already in Class E, so they don't really strictly require change of use. So they can be used for anything under Class E at the moment. No objection from our consultees, internal consultees. And we're securing a section 106 as well for highways, which I'll come to in a minute. Okay, so a planning assessment. In principle, this is fine because it supports small and medium enterprises in terms of employment, and it reuses like a lot of units that are currently vacant. Design-wise, like I said, it's better reveals a historic structure, and then it improves the appearance because the frontages and the roof facades are changing. Excuse me. Yeah, so rear extension, as I showed you before, along the Thames path will be removed, and it will open the space and make it safer in a way with new lighting. Okay, and then if we go on to amenity, safety, and security, obviously there's no addition to the viaduct, that we're not adding any bulk to it, so daylight sunlight is not an issue. Noise outlook. Then the removal of the extension would improve the public realm in general and better relate to the residential areas next door. In terms of security, these units would now be occupied, so that's an improvement itself for making sure there's no like antisocial behavior or safety issues. With the Thames path being widened, that is definitely an improvement for safety. And then there's natural surveillance because obviously these units will be occupied by a business, there'll be people there. And then we're controlling the opening hours to 11 o'clock, which is 2,300 hours, yeah. And anything that's got external seating areas would have to stop before that. So we've said 10 o'clock in the condition. In terms of transport and highways, PITR 6A, which is excellent. Like I say, we've got Putney Bridge Station next door. It is a car-free development. cycle parking, and the service will be controlled by conditions. And then, as previously mentioned, we've got a section 106, which will seek highways contribution in terms of improvement to the footpath, the access and part of the carriageway. We're also seeking £3,000 per year for construction. Okay. Moving on. So these are the heads of terms, which I just said before, so I won't go through that again, but you can have a little quick read if you want to. Yeah, so section 278 will be required to be entered by the section 106, yeah. Okay, and moving on. So we recommend that after reviewing the conditions and the section 106 legal agreement, that you approve this and you can make any changes accordingly if you need to. Thank you. Any questions?
Please, could you refer to the addendum?
Yeah.
I know that you did make some reference at the beginning, but if you could lay out the new conditions.
Okay. So we've got 2 new conditions for this application. So condition number 31, which is indoor air quality. This will only apply for restaurant use, as I said before. And then condition 32, which is a commercial kitchen particulate emission control system. Again, only applicable for a restaurant use. So depending what the end users are, we're not sure whether these will apply or not. So yeah, we'll have to find out who they're going to be in the end, yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. We have one registered speaker, Joe Fisher, the applicant. Joe, please do take a seat at the front. You have 3 minutes to speak. Please do take a seat and turn the microphone on and start whenever you are ready.
Thank you. Chair, members, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. My name is Jo Fisher. I'm Head of Arches at Places for London. Places has existed as self-funded, publicly owned property company of Transport for London since 2023, and our purpose is to invest in all of TfL's commercial estate. And this is to ensure that it is able to provide up-to-date, safe neighbourhood amenities, employment spaces for the future, and also implementing what is extremely important to us is the Mayor's policies. The purpose of our application here is simple, and it's to actually bring these vacant arches back into safe, productive use and transform the public realm around them. The current arch run turns its back on the main pedestrian route, as kindly been shown on the photographs. This makes it narrow in places and actually contributes to a poor sense of safety, particularly after dark. This has been a contributing factor to incidents of crime in the area, including antisocial behaviour, violence and sexual offences. On a day-to-day basis, we know that the lack of natural surveillance here results in street urination, dumping of rubbish, and the routes to and from the footbridge and further along the path are dimly lit after dark. As part of the design process, we commissioned Light Follows Behaviour, and this was to undertake a women and girls safety night walk in the area. The findings reflected what we already knew. The current street environment feels isolated, it's poorly lit and lacks activity and natural surveillance. The report concluded that activating the frontages, the arches to front the Thames path, improve lighting and the public realm will significantly improve the experience of those people that use this route over the footbridge through to Bishop's Park, particularly for women and girls. Our application directly responds to the recommendations by bringing the active frontages through onto the Thames path, together with new windows, open facings, creating a natural surveillance, providing new lighting along the route and around the viaduct, removing the poor quality rear extensions, which will thus ensure that we're widening the Thames path, pedestrian environment and improving visibility. We'll also be introducing a clearer wayfinding between Putney Bridge Station and the pedestrian bridge. Our primary aim is to create a safe, brighter and more welcoming environment for everyone who uses these important riverside routes. The application will also deliver other benefits. It will provide affordable and flexible accommodation for SMEs, a type of space that is becoming increasingly difficult to find in London. Across our Arch estate, 96% of our tenants are small businesses, and we expect these arches to attract the same.
Your time is coming to an end.
Oh,
Please do
right.
finish your last
Quickly.
sentence.
Okay. I want to reassure the committee this evening that as part of TfL, we are long-term owners. We are intrinsically linked to the railway. We are not absent and we're available to work with local people should anyone have any concerns.
Thank you so much, Jo.
You're
Please do
welcome.
turn off your microphone and return to your seat. Now moving to questions from committee members. Any questions? Councillor Dower-Samson.
I was just wondering, how typical is it for the council to put restrictions on the hours for the sale of food and drink as a planning condition as opposed to leaving it to a licensing committee? And why in this case was that, did we decide to do that?
Yeah, I think that's an amenity question because obviously part of the assessment is to protect the amenity of the residents. So a noise is a planning and material consideration. So we have to address it through that. Yeah.
Can I ask a-
Yes, please do.
But presumably all those things can be taken into account at a licensing committee regardless, right? That is the purpose of the licensing committee.
Yeah, just for confirmation, we have in the planning department a structure which is the head of planning enforcement, as also acts as the head of licensing, and it's trying to align those two areas so that licensing and the hours that we look at in planning are consistent. So they dovetail, but also, you know, they sort of marry up. So yeah.
But planning overrides any licensing, is that correct? So if someone was to apply for a 11:30 closing time, for argument's sake, would they be barred by the fact that they have this license?
Separate legislation, but they do in a bit like ownership, you know, this licensing legislation which requires that alcohol, for example, has to be sold, can't be sold after a certain time or have to close at a certain time. And we, as part of the planning process, try to marry that up so it's consistent. So we talk to our colleagues in licensing and we communicate to make sure that we try and be consistent in those hours.
Marilina, would you like to come in?
I might be able to provide some clarity. So there are two separate mechanisms to control the amenity or to safeguard the amenity. And the more, so let's say you have, if the condition attached to the licensing is slightly different, the more stringent condition would apply. But they do try to, you know, ensure that it, you know, they're both the same, but the more stringent one would apply.
Okay, final follow-up. Is it in the power of this committee to apply a condition to remove that?
Yeah, the committee could choose to do that, but what I would just refer the committee to, have you got your agenda, sorry?
Yeah.
It's condition.
Oh, it's going to be, it's not us. This is.
Spare with me, sorry.
Which condition? You've got the right one.
Yeah. Yeah, but which condition?
It's one of the early ones. Paul.
So just for clarity, so we've mentioned many times in this sort of presentation that this Class E use has different types of uses that fall within Class E, and Condition 4 has operational hours which relate to those different types of uses. So for example, the food and drink has a finish time of 11 o'clock, whereas if, for example, it was an indoor sports activity for fitness, it would be until 9 o'clock.
The one I would be referring to is Class E in brackets B.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if committee felt that that was not appropriate, then obviously they could choose to go in a different direction on that. But the hours that are being sought are consistent with the hours in the locality. So, for example, nearby and along the sort of Putney Bridge, there are sort of facilities there and the similar sort of hours that we would be comparable. So, it wouldn't be any hours different to that.
I mean, there are restaurants along New Kings Road that are pretty nearby that do have later licenses to sell, well, to have food and drink. So, I mean, could that not be extended in theory if the licensing committee decided it was appropriate?
We're only looking at what's before us, and what's before us is what, the application could be, a range of things, and we think that the conditions that we've looked at are appropriate for the area. If you look across the road, there's commercial buildings across the road, there's some commercial properties nearby in the vicinity, so it's a mixed area with residential and commercial, so we think that 11 o'clock is not an unreasonable time to have for that. I know that TfL suggested that they might finish early if they think that's appropriate, but that's not in the condition, so yeah.
And if I can make a comment on that, so if TfL suggested that things would close earlier, there's not an ask from the applicant to have later hours as part of the conditions. And I understand what you mean about there's things on the New Kings Road that do close later, but I guess where this is sort of in a slightly more mixed residential area, we know that in South Fulham there are some sensitivities around sort of late night licensing, and 11 p.m. is the point when things become sort of a late night licensable activity. So my understanding is that it's not a condition that's been put in as any kind of barrier, but more that it fits in with the strategic licensing policy that, if this was to come before the licensing committee, might be applied. So I don't think it's planning. My understanding, and officers correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's not planning placing licensing restrictions, it's planning setting out the licensing conditions that would be expected in that area.
Excuse me, through the chair. Yeah, as Miralini, our legal expert, explained, there's separate processes, separate statutory framework in which operators would have to apply. It varies. You have some operators who go for their license first and see what they can achieve under that, and then go for the planning permission if planning is required. And we will be conscious of what licensing committee felt acceptable or not. It's not part of the development plan, but it would be a material consideration, I think, that we would give some consideration to. And I think vice versa. So if an applicant came in for planning, we would, I would certainly imagine whatever we granted, licensing committee may well be interested and give weight to what planning considered, what planning and the Delhi or committee, whatever the decision process was, considered was acceptable. Colleagues may clarify, and I think the question you're asking, Chair, is, was this driven by TfL or were they seeking longer hours and we pulled them back? We can hopefully provide that clarification to committee. Are we able to advise, was this something TfL were pushing for later, or were they happy?
Sorry, I'm very happy to hear very briefly from the applicant. Just, I think this is a question we'd all quite like to be answered. Fantastic. Thank you for clarifying and for your consideration. Does that answer your question, Councillor Daniel? Any further questions on this item, Councillor Harcourt?
Not a question, just to comment on that. As someone who regularly sits on licensing panels and has done a fair number in Fulham and South Fulham, and it's that period from 11 o'clock onwards where late night refreshment comes into order, that it causes the problems and it provokes all sorts of resident objections. So I think the 11 o'clock as a starting point from a planning point of view certainly is the correct one. It doesn't prevent anybody who decides to open a restaurant or whatever from applying for a change in the planning requirement for that particular place in the future.
Thanks, yeah, helpful.
Excellent. Any further questions on this item? In that case, we will move to voting. Firstly, on whether recommendation 1 on the report is agreed. Councillor Harcourt?
Agreed, yeah.
Councillor Melton?
For.
Councillor Pascal-Touré?
For.
Councillor Dan Sanderson?
For.
And I will be voting 4. Therefore, subject to the changes made in the addendum, the recommendation is approved. And moving on to whether recommendation 2 in the report is agreed. And please confirm if you're voting for, against, or not voting. Councillor Harcourt.
Agreed.
Councillor Melton.
For.
Councillor Pascal-Touberry.
For.
Councillor Downer-Sanderson.
For.
And I will be voting for. Therefore, this item is agreed. Thank you very much for your patience. I know you waited a long time to speak. We are moving on to item 10, 643 Fulham Road. And Ronnie, we are staying with you. Thank you.
Okay, so it's me again. Thank you, Chair. So this site is at number 643 Fulham Road. I'll start the presentation. Just before I start, sorry, just in terms of the addendum, we've got further 2 conditions for air quality. So in condition number 30 would be indoor air quality, and then number 32 would be wastewater heat energy recovery system. Again, these conditions will only apply to the additional rooms because the building is already in a large HMO use. Yep. Okay, and also just in the conclusion, we've just strengthened our justification in terms of heritage and conservation. So that's on page 310. Okay. So to start. Okay, so the proposals. So we are looking at extension to an existing house in multiple occupation. So it's increasing from 29 to 44 bedrooms. We've got also an additional mansard roof and a 3-story plus basement re-extension with light wells. There's also minor alterations to the chimney stack and installing some guardrails on the roof, 2 air source heat pumps with acoustic barrier, and the installation of a roof access hatch. Okay. The application side. So the application is along Fulham Road. It's highlighted here in red. Next door to it is the Royal Mail Depot, which is a large commercial industrial site. To the side of it is Pulton Place, which is a small street going on to residential properties to the rear. Immediately across the road from Pulton Place, we've got a terrace of ground floor commercial and upper floor residential. And to the rear of that is a medical center and then some terrace houses further down. And then across the road, we've got a mix of office, residential, and commercial. Okay, so the site is approximately 0.05 hectare. It's within the Walham Green Conservation Area in the Fulham Town Centre, and it is locally listed as a building of merit. Okay. Site location within the conservation area, you can see it sits on the edge, on the southern edge of the conservation area. Okay. So these are the streets in photos, proposed and existing. The idea of this is to show you how discrete it will look. So if you look at the first one, for example, which is showing the existing view along Fulham Road, you could see that as existing, you can see quite a lot of the building, the flank of the building. And with the proposed, the mansard roof would be quite sort of like discrete on the top, and then you have a little bit of view of the re-extension, but not a lot. So it's a fairly discrete proposal in terms of the main road. And again, if you look towards Pulton Place, you'll see the mansard roof only, which is acceptable as fairly low rise. And then along Pulton Place itself, you'll see the re-extension as well as the mansard roof. The re-extension is subservient in scale. It's lower than the main building, and it doesn't take a lot of the garden. It takes less than half the space in the garden. Okay, so if we move on. So these are images of the rear of the site. So this one here is the existing, showing you what's there at the moment. We've got some trees here, which unfortunately will be lost, but we are getting some compensation from the biodiversity net gain in terms of contribution. Okay. And then, yeah, so these two will show you the extension itself at the rear. It highlights the old and the new because obviously the old is more like traditional yellow brick. And then you've got this sort of like connecting structure, which is fairly glazed and lightweight. And then you've got the new to the rear, which is different type of brickwork. And yeah, just to make sure the distinction is clear. Okay. So this is the proposed basement plan. It shows you the basement under the 3-story extension to the rear. It's gonna go underneath the whole structure. Okay, so there are facilities in there like games room, cinema, and sort of amenity for the residents. So these are the existing and proposed ground floor and first floor plans. The idea is showing you the layout and configuration. They are quite modest, you know, nothing much is changing in terms of bedroom size, but we are losing 2 bedrooms and then we are gaining 17. So yeah, to go with the 29, so that would be 44 altogether. So yeah, slight layout reconfiguration on the ground and first floor. Also on the second and the third floor, just to note, you're seeing a roof here because obviously the third floor would be the new mansard, which is here. And yeah, so just showing you the rooms. A vast majority of these rooms will be ensuite rooms. So basically they'll have their bathroom and some other facilities as well. In terms of consultation, we've not received any objection at all. The land use, we think this is acceptable. The area in the town center, highly accessible, not far from a tube station. It's a PTAR 5. And along Fulham Road, you've got a number of buses as well. And they've provided quite generous cycle parking spaces, 16 in total. Okay. And in terms of the design, the mansard was already approved twice. First was in 2010. It was never implemented then, so the permission lapsed. The next time was last year in 2025. The permission is still live, so they can implement the 2025 permission if they want to still. Like I said before, the re-extension is subservient, low scale in terms of how it relates to the main building. It's proportionate. The basement is discrete with light works only. And then the benefit of this scheme is that it will refurbish the building on merit, which is a heritage asset, non-designated heritage asset. And yeah, those features like chimneys and rail guards, you know, they are typical traditional features. So their reinstatement is welcome. So like I said before, in terms of transport, PTAR 5, within Fulham Town Centre and also in the regeneration area. So the improvement is welcome in terms of regeneration as well. It is car-free. No undue impact on the nearest residential properties because they are well separated and the windows are all obliquely located. Okay, and then in terms of BMG, we've asked for a 16,000 contribution in Section 106 financial contribution. This is why this application is at committee today, because otherwise it would have been decided at delegated level. In terms of sustainability, the air source heat pumps welcome because obviously that's a measure in terms of climate change here. The heads of terms, we've got 5. We've got a 30-year management maintenance for biodiversity. Okay, habitats, enhancement of habitats. Okay, monitoring and reporting, again, to do with biodiversity. Yeah, they're all biodiversity related. So the main one is the contribution, like I said before, which is £16,210. Okay. The officer recommendation is that you review the condition and the Section 106 and make appropriate changes if you need to, but to approve the application. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. And you covered the addendums at the start of the presentation. Justin I hope I'm saying that right, the applicant has waived his right to speak as there are no objectors. So we will move straight on to committee questions. Are there any? In that case, we will move on to voting. Firstly, on whether recommendation 1 on the report is agreed, and members, please confirm if you're voting for, against, or not voting. Councillor Harcourt?
For.
Councillor Melton?
For.
Councillor Pascal-Toubre?
For.
Councillor Daniel Sanderson? And I will be voting for. Therefore, subject to the changes made in the addendum, the recommendation is approved. I will now move on to whether recommendation 2 in the report is agreed. Again, please indicate if you're voting for, against, or not voting. Councillor Harcourt?
For.
Councillor Melton?
For.
Councillor Pascal-Toubre?
For.
And Councillor Dan Sampson? And I will be voting for. Therefore, the item is agreed. Thank you very much. Moving on to our final item of the evening, item 11, the Clarence and Roy. We are returning to you. Please do start the presentation whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just draw attention to the addendum to start with. And apologies for the length of the addendum, but unfortunately some of these are necessary to change the report. There's a condition which has been added to replace or refine rather condition 9 rather than it's just basically changing the it's just changing the condition so that it's rather than it being related to the preoccupation of the residential units, it's preoccupation to the development as a whole. So that's the reason for that change. Second one is about indoor air quality, and that is in relation to making sure that the installations include electric induction cooking appliances rather than gas. Then condition 29 on the addendum is a battery uninterruptible power supply. That's because there's a lift that's being created as part of this development to make sure that that didn't crash bang wallop during a breakdown in energy. And then solar panel battery energy storage systems for the solar panels on the roof. There's condition for that. There's delivery service plan condition and the secure by design condition which has been added. Other than that, most of the changes are just sort of refinement. I'll just draw attention to one of them on page 347 on the addendum. It's paragraph 7.4. It's basically just ensuring that the sum of money contributed towards the energy statement payment in lieu is indexed and is secured on practical completion. So apart from those, the rest are, yeah, pretty straightforward. So I'll just come now to the presentation. So the proposal is for a erection of 2 additional floors and 5-storey rear stroke side extensions. New floor space and change of use to ancillary pub. The pub has been retained and then to provide upper floor flats, or 11 self-contained flats. There'll be a reconfiguration and retention of the pub, as I mentioned. This is the location. So you can see on the left-hand side, the location of the site is on North End Road at the junction with May Street. The building on the right-hand side is the white building, cream-coloured 3-storey. And it's about 250 metres north of the town centre. It's in the Barons Court Conservation Area. These are the existing views. So this is the corner location on May Street and North End Road. This is the sort of rear elevation, which is adjacent to a single-storey terrace. And then the bottom image is just showing you the existing car parking provision on site, which is at the sort of rear of the property that would be developed upon as a part of the proposed development. So you can see here at the top image is the 3-storey building as existing. You can see that car parking space is at the rear here. And this is what's being proposed, essentially two additional stories, one mansarded and one further one. But the pattern in the elevation reflects the stories below in the main elevation. And the mansard is recessed to have a subservient appearance. This is just showing you some of the floor space areas. Forgive me for the definitions I've used on the left-hand side. So the salmon area is the pub. The dark green is the beer garden. The aqua colour is the cycle storage. The purple are the bin stores. The lime is the circulatory space for the residential access. And then you've got the yellow emergency access and the rear here. And then the red is the lift. Again, these are just some of the flats on the upper floor. So essentially flat floors 1, 2 and 3 are the same sort of layout with the 3 flats per floor. You can see that all of the flats meet the minimum floor space areas where they need to. Notably, there is one 3-bed unit, which is 98 square metres, which exceeds the minimum by quite some distance of 86 square metres. None of these units have amenity space, i.e. outside space, because it's not physically practical. So the internal space being over the normal size is very welcome. So then it's looking at the impact on some of the neighbouring properties. So this is the application site here, and then to the rear you've got this block A, which is number 198 to 215 Cheeseman's Terrace. They've got windows in the opposing elevation. Similarly at number 116 to 139 here, that's got no windows in the flank and the windows are at an oblique angle. This is the application site here. There will be some new windows introduced in this flank which faces that, but the windows opposing are at an oblique angle. And then you've got the properties at 1348 to 146 North End Road, where it's in this location C. These are single-storey structures. Yeah, that's the sort of context. And then turning to each of these locations in turn, so that you can see here on this image here, this is the pub on the left-hand side, and number 198 to 215 Cheeseman Terraces to the right. You can see there's a sort of a walkway here. In terms of privacy, the windows are no closer than existing, apart from a very small area at the end, because the roads are not directly entirely parallel, they're slightly perpendicular, or slightly, it's not perpendicular, slightly at angle, but the windows are no closer essentially than what's there already, so, and it's not unusual for an urban context. In terms of daylight and sunlight assessment's been provided, and although there are some notable reductions in light in this location, where there are some windows behind these walkways, because they are under existing balconies and walkways, that the amount of light those windows get is very low anyway. So any sort of change to those small areas results in disproportionate loss of light. But in realistic terms, the BRE allows for what's called theoretical analysis, where you're allowed to an exercise where if the balconies were removed and the windows were fully exposed, then what would the situation be? And in that scenario, if the balconies were removed, all these windows would be compliant. So in the round, the windows opposite are accord with the BRE approach and the flexible approach for an urban context. And then in terms of outlook, oops, I can't see much. Yeah, there is a breach of the sort of 45-degree line, which is a notional line, but as the policy says, or the guidance states, that it's then an on-site judgment that we have to take into account. And in this case, the on-site judgment is that the separation of 10 metres in this location in an urban context is acceptable. Then we come then to the impact on the Cheeseman's Terrace, the 116 to 139. You can see here that's the flank elevation of the opposing. This is the flank elevation here shown with these new windows which are greyed out. But these windows are at an oblique angle, they don't face directly, so we think that that's an acceptable impact in terms of privacy. There's no adverse impact. Similarly, in terms of daylight and sunlight, there's no adverse impact. And then similarly for outlook, the angle is an oblique angle, and there are unobstructed views to the properties opposite, so no harm. Then we turn to the properties to the front, which are 138 and 146 North End Road, which are these single-storey structures. These are commercial units, and there is one window here, which is at an oblique angle. We don't think that would have any harm if you look at the extensions at roof level. There's no impact in terms of daylight and sunlight. There's adequate separation. Similarly, there would be no breach of 45-degree lines. We think there's adequate separation. There's just one other thing to draw to your attention. This window here has been chamfered in terms of its design, so that it looks out towards, I can't think what that direction is. On this image, it would be towards the south. But the reason for that is to hopefully not prejudice any future development on top of this terrace here. So if they wanted to come forward with the development in the future, they could put something on that top of that development. In terms of consultation, we've had 5 objections, essentially about keeping the pub, which is being retained, about waste storage and other sort of I would call minor matters, but they're all addressed in the report. Overall, in principle, the pub is being retained. There's a net gain in residential units, which contributes to the council's housing supply. Extensions are satisfactory in scale, sympathetic to the conservation area. In terms of neighbourly impacts, I've gone through that, so there's no adverse impacts. We've got no concerns from my environmental protection team about noise subject to conditions. In terms of highways, there's a car-free scheme. It's secured by Section 106. And then in terms of environmental impact, there's air quality measures secured by condition, and there's a 77% reduction in CO2 emissions in terms of the target, and then the rest is secured by contribution. And then these are the heads of terms that basically is a contribution towards affordable housing off-site. It's not physically practical to provide affordable, well, it is physically practical to provide affordable housing on site, but in terms of registered social landlords, there are no takers for a single unit in this development to sort of manage that. So in this case, the viability assessment has been carried out, and the initial submission by the applicants was suggesting that they could make a very small contribution. After discussions and negotiations, that's been increased up to £207,000, which goes into a pot which the council can use to provide housing off-site. And then I've mentioned the carbon offset, and then there's an urban greening factor because there's off-site planting contribution, plus all the various things towards economic development, local employment skills and local procurement. And then a highways contribution to monitoring, and some Sheffield stands will be provided as well, and then air quality monitoring. And therefore, we're recommending recommendation for approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roy. I'd now like to invite Katie Lister, who is the agent, to speak. Katie, you have 3 minutes, and thank you so much for your incredible patience. I'm sorry it's been such a long evening. If you just press the button in front of you.
Yeah.
Excellent. And start your 3 minutes whenever you are ready.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Chair and members. My name is Katie Lister, and I'm the planning consultant and agent speaking on behalf of the applicant tonight, Optic Realm. We are delighted that our proposals have been recommended for approval this evening, which is a culmination of several years' work, working closely and alongside your planning officers to deliver reconfigured and retained floor space of the public house and new residential accommodation above. The scheme has had, oh sorry, my eyes are watering. The scheme has had input from a range of disciplines throughout the application process, including planning, heritage, and urban design. The proposals before you reflect that constructive and collaborative engagement. Sorry.
Would you like to pause and get a tissue? And
no, it's okay.
You
Thank
sure?
you. Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Members will be aware that the NPPF London Plan and Local Plan place great emphasis on making efficient use of land, optimising site capacity and significantly boosting the supply of homes. This is particularly important in London, where land is constrained and housing need is high. And as such, the policy context gives substantial weight to the value of using suitable brownfield land for new homes. Specifically, the proposed development would achieve a sustainable form of development by optimising the site to provide 11 new self-contained residential units, which would make a valuable contribution towards the council's housing targets. In parallel, the proposed development would retain and not adversely affect the ongoing operation and viability of the existing public house at the lower levels, which provides local employment and is recognised as an important community space. The proposal is a high standard of design which respects the scale, mass, form and grain of surrounding development and would preserve the character of the conservation area. The applicant has worked hard to address any comments from statutory consultees throughout the determination process, such that there are no technical objections remaining. The proposed development would be subject to a range of conditions which the applicant is in agreement to. The proposals will also secure a package of Section 106 contributions, including over 200,000 towards affordable housing and additional contributions towards economic development, urban greening, highways works and carbon offset. Mayoral and local silt would also be secured. We hope that members recognise the real benefits of the proposed development before you tonight and are able to support your officer's recommendation in approving the application. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie. No, not at all. And very much appreciate you being very in time. Please do feel free to take your seat back. Now moving on to committee members' questions, and can I start by saying I think I speak for certainly myself and I'm sure a few other members of the committee when I say I'm very pleased that the pub will remain. Any further questions?
Shouldn't admit to having used the services of the pub on a number of occasions.
Well, I think several of us might be in the same category. Councillor Pascal Toubre. Could you? Oh.
Yeah, as well as congratulating you on the aesthetic of this, which is great. There's been a depressing trend in London of people choosing to move above a pub and then complaining about pub-related activities. And especially at times like this, we've seen pubs legitimately staying open for longer, and things like that can happen. What protections are being given to the pub to make sure that everybody knows concerned what it is that they're letting themselves in for?
So through the chair, I just drew attention first of all to page 327 in the officer's report, and then there's a reference in paragraph 6.8, which references London Plan Policy D14, which talks about the agent of change principle, and essentially that states that the responsibility for mitigating impacts from existing noise and other nuisance generating activities or uses on the proposed new noise-sensitive development. So essentially what it's trying to do is the development should be designed to ensure that established noise and other noise generating uses remain viable and can continue to grow without unreasonable restrictions being placed upon them. So that has been a material consideration as part of this development, which means that appropriate conditions have been added in terms of sound insulation and other measures, noise mitigating measures, to make sure that the pub stays as a viable asset.
Thank you. Any further questions? If no further questions, we will move on to voting. Firstly, on whether recommendation 1 in the report is agreed, members, please indicate if you're voting for, against, or not voting. Councillor Harcourt?
In favour.
Councillor Melton?
For.
Councillor Pascal Toubre?
For.
Councillor Dan Sanderson? And I will be voting for. Therefore, subject to the changes made in the addendum, the recommendation is approved. Moving on to whether recommendation 2 in the report is agreed. Again, please indicate if you're voting for, against, or not voting. Councillor Harcourt?
For.
Councillor Melton?
For.
Councillor Pascal Toubre? For. Councillor Dana Sanderson? And I will be voting for. Therefore, the recommendation is agreed. Thank you, everyone, for attending or watching tonight's meeting. Thank you to everyone for your patience, including speakers. The draft minutes of this meeting will be published on the Council's website shortly, and they will be formally approved at our next meeting on the 15th of September 2026. If you have any queries concerning the applications, please contact the case officer in the application report. Thank you again so much to everyone. Thank you, officers. I know it's been a long night, and